100 paradoxes about time that break logic to fall asleep to. If time isn't real, why do we run out of it? Somewhere between your first breath and your final memory lies a riddle that not even the universe can answer. What if everything you know about time, clocks, calendars, history, is just the surface of something far more twisted, strange, and infinite? Imagine a clock that ticks backward, a moment that stretches forever, or a memory from the future. These aren't just science fiction tropes. They're paradoxes, real ones that have haunted philosophers, physicists, and dreamers for centuries. In this video, we won't just explore time. We'll feel it dissolve, twist, pause, and whisper back. Let go of what you think you know. Because tonight, we're stepping into a spiral, 100 paradoxes that will not give you answers, but will unravel your logic, lull your thoughts, and guide your mind into a gentler place. Close your eyes when you're ready. The journey through time begins, not with a step, but with a question. The illusion of now. The room is quiet now, just the low hum of the world beneath your breathing. Somewhere in the distance, a clock ticks, not loudly, not rhythmically, just enough to remind you that time is still pretending to move forward. But let me ask you something softly. Where are you exactly? Not your body, not your mind rushing ahead to tomorrow's list or drifting back to last week's smile. I mean you, this very moment. Is this moment real? Or is it a kind of ghost? There's a strange trick time plays on us. What we call now, this sliver between the past and the future, is already gone by the time you try to hold it. Like trying to catch light with your hands. You feel its warmth, but never its shape. Neuroscience whispers another secret. It takes about 80 milliseconds for your brain to register anything. A flash of light, a voice, a kiss. That means what we think of as now is actually always slightly after. We live in a version of the world that's already happened. You are always, in a tiny way, late to your own life. Is it weird? One man said as he adjusted the fold of his coat, that every time I feel something deeply, I wonder if it's already over. His friend, quietly tying his shoe beside him, didn't look up. I think that's just how time works, he replied. It shows up after the heartbeat. St. Augustine once said, "What is time? If no one asks me, I know. But if someone does, I cannot explain it." Maybe now is just a placeholder, a fragile story we tell ourselves to feel grounded in a world constantly slipping past, like a bench on a moving train. You sit, you feel still, but everything is rushing around you. And if the present is always just slightly out of reach, are we truly living in reality, or just retelling it as fast as our brains allow? There's something gentle in accepting that maybe you don't have to hold now perfectly. Maybe it doesn't need to be captured. Maybe it only needs to be noticed and then released, like breath. I took a picture of the sky earlier, someone said today. It looked perfect, but by the time I showed it to anyone, it was already different. Yeah, another replied, sipping slowly. The sky's funny like that. It always leaves before the photo loads. So here we are, perched on the razor-thin edge between what just happened and what hasn't yet begun. You're not late. You're not early. You're simply floating, as we all are, inside a story that keeps rewriting itself one silent beat at a time. And if you drift now, into stillness, into thought, into sleep, that's all right too. The present moment will go on whispering, even without your attention. Let us now step beyond the fragile shore of the present, into a deeper puzzle, where time bends further, where the future sometimes seems to arrive before the past. Close your eyes. We're not chasing clocks here. We're only listening. And the next question is already waiting. The Bootstrap Paradox. What if something could exist without ever being created? Not born, not built, not conceived in any clear moment of time. It simply exists, looped into reality like a song that no one remembers composing, yet everyone knows. This is the strange world of the Bootstrap Paradox, a riddle wrapped in time travel, where cause and effect begin to blur and twist like a serpent devouring its own tail. Picture this. A man discovers an old book. The pages are yellowed, the ideas inside brilliant, far beyond his time. He studies the book, learns its secrets, becomes a master of its knowledge. Years later, he builds a time machine. With a sense of destiny, he travels back in time and hands the book to a younger version of himself. The loop completes. The young man grows up, learns the same wisdom, and repeats the act, over and over again. But ask yourself, where did the book truly come from? Who was the original author? There isn't one. There never was. The book has no origin. It was never written. It exists only because it exists. And that is the paradox. It's as if the universe allowed an idea to echo endlessly without a source. An object, a memory, a message, looped in time, untethered from creation. Wait, someone might say in a quiet room, so you're telling me the book just is? Yes, another might answer, eyes wide with curiosity, like a circle with no beginning, no end. This thought unsettles something deep inside us. We're used to beginnings, to first steps and first words. But the Bootstrap Paradox suggests that reality might sometimes skip that requirement. It invites the eerie possibility that causality, this backbone of our understanding, can be bypassed entirely. And if something so small as a book can do this, what about larger things? What about the universe? Could the cosmos itself be caught in such a loop? A self-generating cycle with no original spark? Not created, but simply being, as natural as breath, as mysterious as silence. The paradox whispers that maybe the Big Bang was not the beginning, but a note passed backward in time, handed to itself. The message, exist. In the stillness of night, these thoughts drift like fog across the mind. Not meant to be solved, perhaps, just held, like a question echoing back and forth through time, bouncing between mirrors. And so, we float forward into the next contradiction. One not about creation, but erasure. A paradox where time doesn't just bend logic, it swallows it whole. The Grandfather Paradox. It begins quietly, a thought you weren't supposed to have, a question that tiptoes into your mind just as the world starts to settle. What if the very act of being here unravels the thread that allowed you to arrive? You might be folding laundry, letting the soft weight of fabric fall between your fingers. Or maybe you're standing in line, half listening to the buzz of conversation. And in that space, a strange logic slides in, one you never invited. What if you traveled back in time, back before you were born? You find your grandfather as a young man, still unsure of the world, not yet in love. And somehow, by accident or intention, you prevent him from meeting the woman who would become your grandmother. What then? Without them, there is no parent. And without a parent, no you. But if you're never born, who exactly went back? One voice lingers in the dusk. But isn't that just a story? And another answers softly, so is every law of time until we break it. This is the Grandfather Paradox, a beautiful fracture in the mirror of cause and effect. The moment you try to shift the past, the ground beneath your logic begins to blur. Time, once a line, curls into a loop, or worse, folds in on itself like paper set aflame. It's more than a trick of science fiction. It's a riddle that seeps into the way we understand who we are. If your present can erase your past, then what is real? The air feels heavier, not with fear, but with mystery. Like you've stepped into a library, where every book writes and unwrites itself, depending on who dares open it. A woman once paused mid-sentence on a train and whispered to a stranger, "I had a dream I was never born," and still woke up crying. The man beside her nodded and replied, "Sometimes I think my shadow walks ahead of me, waiting to pull me back." Perhaps reality protects itself. Maybe the laws of time bend just enough to keep us safe, nudging paradoxes back into place like a self-healing wound. Or maybe each contradiction splits the universe, carving new branches where every outcome, no matter how absurd, is allowed to bloom. You feel it now, don't you? That quiet hum, a soft suggestion that every choice might be echoing across 1,000 timelines. Somewhere out there, your grandfather turned left instead of right. Somewhere else, he never left his village. Somewhere, everywhere, you are and aren't at once. You may find yourself asking, did time prevent me from undoing myself? Or did I never matter enough to change it? But hush, let that question rest tonight. Let it curl into the corners of your thoughts, not to be solved, but simply held. We'll drift now, not forward, not backward, but sideways, into the splinters of possibility where versions of you exist in quiet contradiction, where nothing is certain, but everything is real. Close your eyes, traveler. The next paradox awaits. The Multiverse Maze. What if, somewhere out there, you said yes instead of no? What if you never left that job, never sent that message, never turned your head when you did? And what if those other versions of you weren't just possibilities, but realities, quietly unfolding in a universe just next door? The multiverse isn't just science fiction anymore. It's a genuine hypothesis drawn from the fabric of quantum physics. The many worlds interpretation proposes something radical, that every quantum decision leads to a branching of realities. Every time you face a choice, big or small, the universe doesn't flip a coin, it splits. In one branch, you stay. In another, you leave. In one, you fall in love. In another, you never even meet. Are you saying there's another me out there? Yes, someone replies, half asleep in the dark. And not just one, millions. A silence lingers, heavy like fog. So, who's the real me? Maybe the one asking the question. This idea, that every version of you exists somewhere, is both liberating and disturbing. It whispers that nothing is truly lost, because in some other place, it still happened. But it also unsettles the very core of meaning. If every possible outcome unfolds, what power does your decision actually hold? Are you choosing? Or are you simply experiencing one thread in a tapestry already endlessly woven? Imagine time not as a line, but as a tree exploding in all directions, each branch another version of you. One where you moved to another city, one where you never recovered from heartbreak, one where you found peace early, and another where you're still searching. In the stillness of night, as your mind softens, you may start to feel them, not as ghosts, but as shadows of could-have-beens, echoes, not haunting you, but humming beside you. Would you want to meet one of them? Only if they were happy. Maybe they'd ask you the same. This maze of selves turns every moment sacred, not because it's the only path, but because you're walking it here, now. You might be one leaf among billions, but you're still shimmering in the light of your own becoming. That makes your journey no less real, no less yours. As we drift deeper into this midnight meditation, let the noise of other timelines soften. You don't need to chase what might have been. You are here. This version of you is breathing, listening, wondering. And now, let us rest within the eerie stillness of a paradox that traps you between eternity and a single blink. Zeno's arrow, a stillness that moves. You're lying in bed, and a soft hush settles in. A soundless moment stretches out, as if the world holds its breath. Somewhere far away, but also strangely near, Zeno lifts a finger and points at an arrow mid-flight. The arrow hovers, not in slow motion, but in no motion at all. Just there, suspended. And in this moment of stillness, a question unfolds, not harshly, but gently, like silk unraveling. If every moment is frozen, how can anything ever move? Zeno once asked this in a world before clocks ticked and hands turned. He pictured time as a string of instants, tiny still photographs of reality, each one disconnected. In each of these slices, the arrow is still, no blur, no momentum, just presence. So how, he wondered, does stillness become movement? Two people walk by in conversation, one asking, "Do you ever feel like life's just skipping between screenshots?" The other laughs softly, "Like when you're in the middle of a thought and suddenly you're at your destination without remembering the steps?" The arrow reminds us of that. If time were truly made of frozen now points, then there's never a between. No transition, no movement, only a pile of unmoving frames stitched together by something else. Yet, when you release the breath you didn't realize you were holding, the world begins again. You remember that the arrow does fly, and that your footsteps, though faint, leave trails in memory. So what moves us then? Perhaps time isn't a conveyor belt carrying us from one point to another. Perhaps it's born in the very act of motion. It is not the stage. We are not walking through time. It is the music made by our steps. A gentle whisper rises inside your chest. Maybe change doesn't happen in time. Maybe it creates time. Think of waves. They aren't objects. They're the rhythm of energy moving through water. Time, too, might not be something that flows, but the flutter of becoming, an illusion crafted from change, just as a film becomes a story only when played. Someone once sat at a cafe table and said, "It's strange. When I sit still, I feel like I've vanished. But when I move, it's like the world exists again." The person across from them, eyes half closed, replied, "Maybe movement is the only thing real. Everything else is just memory." In that pause between their words, the arrow lifts again. It doesn't strain. It doesn't need to try. It moves, not because of time, but because of the rhythm we call real. And now, as your thoughts ripple softly into rest, the paradox remains, not to be solved, but to accompany you. The arrow never really lands. It only teaches us that stillness and movement are not opposites. They are partners in the same dance. Let yourself drift now, as we turn gently toward the edge of memory, where questions about the past unfold not to be answered, but to be held, like the echo of wings in the night, like an arrow that moves only when no one watches. The memory paradox. Do you ever wonder if what you remember is what actually happened? You sit with an old friend, laughing about a moment you both swear you lived, yet the details don't line up. The color of the car, the song on the radio, whether it was raining or just gray. "I could have sworn it was raining," one says. "No, it was sunny," You even had sunglasses on," the other replies with a chuckle. Suddenly, the certainty starts to unravel. And with it, so does the past. If the past only exists in memory, and memory can change, then what is the past? This is the quiet riddle we drift into now, a paradox that lies not in the stars, but in your own mind. Neuroscientists have discovered something almost poetic. When you recall a memory, you're not pulling it from a vault, you're reshaping it. Each retrieval is a recreation. Every time you think of a moment, it's softened like warm wax and reshaped by who you are today. Your current mood, your emotional needs, your longing or your regret. So if every time we revisit a memory we alter it, what becomes of the original? Was it ever fixed? Or have we simply told ourselves stories so many times that fiction and fact became indistinguishable? Maybe your most vivid childhood memory isn't a perfect snapshot, but a painting retouched over years of emotional editing. There's something tender in that, and troubling too, because our memories build the scaffolding of our identity. They tell us who we are, where we came from, and why we matter. But if those memories shift and bend, then what are we really built on? A person might think of themselves as brave because they remember standing up to a bully. But what if that moment never happened that way? What if they froze, and the mind, unwilling to carry shame, revised the script to grant them courage? And yet, isn't that what poetry does? It doesn't record the world. It reflects it, as felt, as dreamed. So perhaps memory isn't meant to be factual. Perhaps it's a mirror fogged with feeling, shaped more by meaning than accuracy. And if so, then the real value of memory isn't in its truth, but in its emotional resonance. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hill, a woman asked her father, "Do you remember when we used to sit here when I was small?" The father nodded slowly, smiling. "Of course, you always brought your stuffed rabbit." She tilted her head. "I didn't have a stuffed rabbit." They both laughed. "Well," he said, "maybe I needed you to." Isn't that what we do? We create the past that makes sense for the present. A memory becomes a companion, not a document. A way of telling ourselves, this is who I was, or needed to be, to become who I am. So if our past is a living, breathing thing, not carved in stone but whispered in wind, then maybe we stop asking, did it happen exactly this way? And instead ask, what is this memory trying to show me now? Because memory may not be a photograph, but a lantern. Faint, flickering, and warm. It doesn't show the whole path, but it helps us move forward. And now, let us wander deeper into that flicker, toward the edge of forgetting, to a place where time no longer needs to be seen, to still be felt. The observer's time. There's a question that brushes softly against the edges of thought, like wind stroking tall grass in a field no one sees. Does time still pass if no one is there to witness it? Two friends sit quietly under the glow of a street lamp, the sky bruised with midnight. One breaks the silence. Have you ever wondered if time only moves when someone watches it? The other replies without turning. Maybe that's why days feel faster when we're not paying attention, like it rushes ahead while we blink. In quantum physics, this isn't just poetic musing, it's oddly practical. There, the presence of an observer doesn't just document reality, it alters it. Particles change their behavior under a gaze, like dancers sensing an audience. The act of noticing shapes the thing being noticed. A ripple forms where attention lands. Time may not be so different. Could it be that the ticking only begins when someone listens? that hours don't exist unless we give them names like morning, lunch break, or bedtime. In the absence of attention, time might still stretch forward, but with no clock to chime, no breath to count, no heart to beat, it becomes silent, like a story never told. Somewhere in the universe, a planet rotates in a black sea of stars. No creatures walk its surface, no minds record its sunrises, its nights fall without poetry, its seasons shift without witness. Did those years happen? Or are they frozen in waiting, like unopened letters in the dark? One afternoon, someone in a crowded cafe stares blankly out the window and says to a stranger, "Sometimes I wonder if I'm the only one holding time together." The stranger gives a curious look, then smiles. Maybe we all are, just by noticing it. It's strange to think we might be weavers of time itself, not because we control the future, but because the thread only unspools when we glance down to follow it. If that's true, then every moment we miss slips by unformed, and every moment we feel is etched forever, even if no camera caught it. You've had days that evaporated, haven't you? Hours you couldn't recall, even though you lived them. Did time fail to arrive, or did you simply forget to greet it? Now close your eyes. Let the thought float like a paper lantern. Maybe you're not trapped in time at all. Maybe time is trapped in you, carried like breath in your lungs or memory in your gaze, and when you sleep, it pauses, not gone, just waiting for your return. So we drift now, from this forest of invisible moments, into the pull of something larger, where time doesn't just slip by unnoticed. It bends, it curves, and the deeper you go, the stranger it becomes. Gravitational time dilation. They say time flies, but what if somewhere far away it lingers, slower, heavier, caught in the arms of gravity like honey thickening in a cold jar? You look up at the stars and see the past, but what if someone out there is looking back, still living in a moment you've already forgotten? Do you think time feels different on a mountain than it does in a valley? Well, technically yes, but it's so small you'd never notice. So, near a black hole, would you notice? Oh yes. You'd feel like you were frozen while the universe kept on walking. Einstein taught us something the clocks never hinted at, that time bends, stretches, breathes. It is not a ticking drumbeat marching forward. It is a pliable thread, tugged and teased by mass and motion. The closer you fall into a gravitational field, the more your seconds slow down compared to someone watching from afar. It's not science fiction. It's science that feels like fiction. Now picture this. Two twins, identical in every way. One stays on Earth. The other travels to the edge of a black hole's event horizon, where the pull is nearly infinite. Years pass on Earth, decades even. But for the twin near the black hole, only a few hours tick by. When they return, who are they to each other now? "I waited for you," says the one who stayed. "And I was only gone a little while," says the one who traveled. But their bodies tell different stories. One etched by time, the other barely touched. How can two people born in the same moment belong to the same lifetime, if time itself has refused to treat them equally? This paradox is not about clocks or calendars. It is about connection. If time drips slowly in one place and races forward in another, how do we stay close to those we love? Can we still share memories if our minutes no longer match? You begin to wonder, maybe time is not the same river for everyone. Maybe each of us carries a private current, pulled by forces we cannot see, shaped by where we stand and how deeply we fall. And yet, There's a strange beauty in it. The idea that time is not fixed, but alive. That in some corner of the cosmos, someone you love might still be paused in the moment you said goodbye. Not because they wanted to linger, but because gravity itself refused to let them go. Would you still love someone? The first voice asks. If they aged 100 years and you only aged 1? I think I would, the second replies. Because love, unlike time, doesn't always obey physics. And with that gentle defiance, we let the thought dissolve. We've lingered long enough in gravity's cradle. It's time to float forward, toward a cosmic riddle where the beginning is somehow after the end, and time may fold like paper in the dark. The big crunch versus the big bounce. A soundless weight settles in the sky above you. Not a storm, but something older. A presence that feels like an exhale held too long. You don't need to understand it. Just let it rest beside you. There's a question whispered by the stars, one they don't ask loudly anymore. It's softer now, like breath on a window. What if the universe doesn't end, but folds in on itself? One evening, two strangers sit beneath a rusted train bridge. One looks up between the metal beams and says, "Funny, huh? We always talk about time going forward, but maybe it curves. Maybe this whole thing is just looping, like us waiting for this late train every night." The other nods, rubbing tired eyes. "Then next time," he says, "I hope I remember to bring an umbrella." Some physicists speak of the big crunch, the day when expansion ends and gravity calls everything home again. Galaxies pulled back into a center, not gone, not erased, just gathered. And maybe in that gathering, pressure builds again. Space clenches, and from that singularity, another beginning explodes. That's the big bounce, a new breath drawn in the lungs of time. But what does that mean for us? You walk a quiet hallway, lit only by the dim green of an exit sign. Your feet echo against tile. Each step feels familiar, though you've never been here. Is this the first time you've walked this path, or the 1,000th return? If time breathes, if the universe exhales and draws back in, then perhaps so do we, not in memory, in rhythm. Inhale, light, warmth, the birth of stars. Exhale, cooling, falling, the long twilight of suns. And again, not a resurrection, a repetition, not a rerun, a resonance. What if you're not living your life for the first time, but playing your part in a memory the cosmos already holds? A performance so ancient and familiar that even the atoms in your body hum the tune. A woman in a laundromat folds the same red sweater for the 3rd time tonight. She smiles at the child watching cartoons and says, "Déjà vu's a weird thing. Sometimes I think we're just redoing the universe's favorite scenes. Not fate, not predetermination, but something quieter, like a story retold with love. The bounce doesn't ask if you get it right, only that you show up. Again and again. Time, then, may not be a single arrow. It might be breath, a bellows, a wave pulling sand back into the sea just to crash it again with new shape, but never quite the same. And if that's true, the end is not the end. It's a silent nod, a brief closing of the eyes before the curtain lifts once more. Let your thoughts rest there for a moment, on that gentle cycle of collapse and return, like tides, like sleep, like forgiveness. And as we lean into that rhythm, we drift gently toward the next question. What if time does more than repeat? What if it remembers? Eternal return. Imagine sitting quietly beneath a midnight sky and someone leans in to ask, what if you had to live this exact life again? Every moment, every breath, exactly the same. Not once, but forever. The question doesn't shout, it whispers. And in that whisper lives a tremor, a pulse, one that awakens something deep within us. Nietzsche didn't pose this as fantasy. It was a mirror. The eternal return, he called it. Not merely a theory of time, but a test of your spirit. If you knew that every choice you make would echo for eternity, would you change anything? Or would you, for the first time, begin to live deliberately? Wouldn't that be exhausting? Someone might ask. Maybe, the other replies, their voice low, but maybe it would make you brave. Because if time loops, not forward into novelty, but back into sameness, then our responsibility becomes divine. Suddenly, the ordinary moment becomes sacred. A sigh, a glance, a mistake. None of it can be dismissed as trivial if it's destined to recur eternally. That coffee you spilled, it will always be spilled. That person you hurt, always hurt. The apology you never gave, always missing. But here's the paradox. The eternal return doesn't chain us to regret. It frees us to live as if each moment matters beyond measure. Because in this view, it does. And so you wonder, what if love is not found once, but forever refelt? What if your laughter tonight isn't fleeting, but part of a cosmic rhythm, playing again and again like a heartbeat stitched into the fabric of the universe? Maybe time isn't a line, nor a prison, but a circle of fire we're meant to dance within, not escape. The implications are dizzying. If fate is to relive it all, are we doomed? Or are we gifted the rarest challenge, to affirm life so deeply, so honestly, that we would choose it again, without changing a thing? It doesn't mean perfection. It means affirmation. Not the demand for a flawless life, but the embrace of your own flawed, flickering existence. As one figure in the dark might say, almost whispering to their friend beside them, "Would you live your life again?" And the other, after a long pause, might answer, "Only if I could remember to love it more the second time." The eternal return is not a warning. It's a meditation, a slow, steady unfolding of responsibility and wonder. If your choices echo forever, let them echo with courage. If your life repeats, let it sing. And now, as you rest in the glow of this idea, let us step beyond repetition and move gently into a deeper time still, where meaning becomes the measure, not the minute. The shipwreck of future selves. Somewhere in the background hum of your thoughts, there's a version of you that didn't make it. Not because you failed, but because a choice, small, quiet, maybe even kind, rippled out and cracked the hull of their fragile future. You walk through today thinking of your future self like a character in a faraway film. You assume they'll be stronger, wiser, maybe luckier. So you hand them your exhaustion like a receipt. You whisper, "They'll figure it out," and continue scrolling, postponing, staying silent when you should speak, saying yes when you meant no. Do you ever think about your future self? Someone asked me once as we waited in line for coffee, half awake. I laughed. Not really. I just assume they're more organized than I am. She looked at me sideways and said, "Mine's probably crying in a hallway somewhere." That landed harder than it should have. Psychologists have studied this strange disconnection, how we treat our future selves as if they're strangers we barely know. We make them clean up emotional messes. We give them debt to carry, habits to untangle, loneliness to unlearn. But what if these future selves are not distant possibilities, but actual passengers already aboard our timeline, bruised and weathering the choices we delay? Picture a ship setting sail with versions of you aboard, some hopeful, some limping, some quietly sinking below the surface. not metaphors, real emotional footprints, real echoes of consequences, and you, here in the now, are both the captain and the storm. Have you ever skipped sleep knowing it would make tomorrow harder, but you did it anyway? Or left a conversation unfinished because the truth was too heavy to say? That ache you delay, does it vanish or simply migrate? There's a kind of invisible economy at work between now and later, and often the ones we tax are the selves we haven't met yet. Why do we always think we'll be better people next week? A friend once said while folding laundry on the floor. I don't know, I answered. Maybe it's easier than admitting we already know what we need to do. He paused, pressing a towel flat. Yeah, or maybe we just hope the future version of us has more courage. That kind of hope can be gentle, but it can also be cruel. It says, let them carry what I'm too afraid to hold now. But maybe we can shift, even slightly, not in grand gestures, but in small compass turns, taking a walk when you'd rather scroll, saying no even if your voice trembles, drinking water instead of resentment. These moments are oars. They don't erase the wrecks, but they can steer some of them safely to shore. And if tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you feel the weight of choices not yet made, be kind. Not every path can be perfect. Not every future self will arrive whole. But they can arrive seen. They can arrive remembered. Now, let us float toward a stranger question. What if time itself forgets? Temporal amnesia. In the quiet corridors of existence there lies a strange whisper, one that speaks not of time's passage, but of its erasure. Imagine waking up one morning, not only forgetting your dreams, but forgetting that you ever dreamed at all. No trace, no residue, just the hollow calm of a clean slate. Now stretch that sensation across the cosmos. That's the haunting beauty of temporal amnesia. Some theories in quantum cosmology suggest that our universe could undergo a kind of reset, not a rewind, not a repeat, a complete loss of memory. Picture the universe like a mind suffering from an epileptic blackout, seizing in silence and waking with no recollection of what came before. In such a model, the cycles of cosmic rebirth wouldn't just build on what was, they would start fresh every time. No cosmic history, no ancestral stars, just the flicker of a new beginning, unaware of the eternity behind it. Do you think the universe remembers us? I'm not sure it even remembers itself. That's sad, isn't it? Like we could live and love and laugh and then just blink out. Or peaceful, like a warm sleep where nothing hurts anymore. But then, what was the point? Maybe the point wasn't to be remembered. Maybe the point was to feel it, even if just once. The idea is both comforting and terrifying. If identity is defined by memory, what happens when the memory vanishes? Are we still us? If the universe forgets everything it once was, does it become something new, or just an eternal stranger to itself? And there's a deeper echo hiding beneath these questions. What holds the universe together if it has no memory? Scientific laws, after all, are built on repetition, on cause and effect, on the assumption that what worked yesterday will work tomorrow. But if there is no yesterday, if yesterday never existed at all, what anchors these laws? Does gravity remember how to pull? Does light remember how to travel? Or do the rules themselves drift, like amnesiacs in the dark? There's a kind of eerie purity in this vision. A universe without legacy. A cosmos that begins again and again, not as a cycle, but as an amnesiac child with each dawn. No guilt, no triumph, just potential, forever unshaped by what came before. And maybe, in some way, that's what sleep is for us too. A nightly forgetting, a daily rebirth, a soft rehearsal for the universe's quietest truth, that nothing must be remembered for it to matter. As the stars pulse quietly above, indifferent and eternal, we drift onward, shedding the weight of what was, embracing the fragile glow of what might be. And now, we take one more step into the deeper unknown, where time does not forget, but where time, perhaps, never begins. The paradox of the first second. There's a question that quietly tiptoes behind every ticking clock, one that waits not in the present nor in the past, but somewhere outside it all. When did time begin? And more strangely, how can something begin if beginnings themselves are tied to time? Two friends are walking under dim city lights, their feet tapping rhythmically on the sidewalk like a second hand. One says, "So, what happened before the Big Bang?" The other chuckles, not mockingly, but like someone brushing their hand over a dusty riddle. That's like asking what's north of the North Pole. And they fall into silence, not because there's nothing to say, but because there's too much to feel. The Big Bang Theory whispers that time itself was born alongside space, not born in space, born with it, like twins in the same first breath. But how do you describe the first second, when even first and second are children of that moment? Think of a book sealed in the library of the cosmos. Its first page begins mid-sentence, no preface, no cover, just a word hanging in white silence. You turn back, but there is no back. The spine is smooth, uncut. Only forward is written. In that silence before the first tick, was there potential? A waiting? Or is that just our minds, addicted to causality, begging for a prologue? You stand at the edge of a lake where ripples stretch in every direction, but you saw no stone fall. Did something throw it? Or did the water simply remember how to move? Another voice enters gently. "Hey, can I ask you something weird?" Always. If time didn't exist before the universe, then how did it start? Like, how does anything just start without time? The friend shrugs, half serious, half in awe. Maybe it didn't start. Maybe we started calling it start because we woke up inside it. Some physicists say time is emergent, not fundamental. That it's like temperature, real, but only because of deeper things in motion. And maybe time only makes sense inside a universe like ours. Outside it, the concept evaporates. It's not just absent, it's meaningless. And yet we ask, because the need to find a before feels stitched into our DNA, a yearning for cause, for order, for some hand that lit the match. But what if there was no match? What if the fire simply was? Close your eyes. Let go of needing an answer. The question has its own rhythm. It doesn't ask to be solved, just to be heard. You've reached the place where time folds into stillness, where the first second hovers like a breath not yet taken. Let it be enough. Let the mystery cradle you. And now, from that very first flicker of being, we drift toward a stranger space still, where timelines dissolve not because they never began, but because they never needed to. Chronophobia. It begins as a whisper, the kind that hums quietly behind your daily thoughts, like the ticking of a clock in a room you thought was silent. A sense, not of being late, but of being chased. Chronophobia is not simply the fear of growing old or dying. It is the visceral anxiety that time is happening to you, whether you are ready or not. A terror that the very thing carrying you forward is also the one thing you can never slow down, hold on to, or plead with. It moves, and it moves without you. Do you ever get that feeling? She asks, staring at the ceiling in a quiet hospital room, that tomorrow is already behind you before today even ends? Her friend turns his face toward her slowly, lips barely parting. Every night, especially when I realize I didn't feel the day. I just moved through it. This is where chronophobia finds its grip, in the moments between moments. For the prisoner watching sunlight crawl across the same wall day after day. For the elderly man whose birthday feels more like a warning than a celebration. For the widow who cannot move because every second without her loved one is a step further away. It is not death they fear. It's time itself, because it does not pause to let them breathe. Imagine standing in front of an hourglass, watching the grains fall. You want to stop it, even just for a second, not to change the past, not even to shape the future, just to rest from the pressure of forwardness. But you can't, you never could, because the sands don't care whether you are running toward your dreams or away from your regrets. They fall all the same. One might ask, is time cruel? Or are we simply unprepared for its indifference? The mind, when cornered by this fear, begins to grasp at illusions of control. Calendars, schedules, resolutions. They are our way of painting fences around a river. We plan not because we are organized, but because deep down, we're afraid that if we don't keep busy, we'll be swept away by something we cannot name. Chronophobia whispers, "You are wasting your life," and it never tells you how to stop. Yet, what if peace lies not in the struggle against time, but in our willingness to float? I stopped wearing my watch, he says, looking at his bare wrist with a soft smile. It didn't slow anything down, but somehow, it let me breathe. The fear then may not be in time itself, but in our resistance to its nature, in our longing for a pause button, in our dread that the minutes we spent worrying were the ones we were meant to live. Chronophobia is not just a phobia, it is a mirror. It reflects back the parts of ourselves we left unlived, the conversations we delayed, the kindness we meant to show but saved for later. And as the river moves, those fragments drift further downstream, unreachable. But maybe, just maybe, the antidote is not in rewinding, but in realizing that this very breath, right now, is a moment given, not taken. That if time cannot be stopped, then perhaps it should be honored, not feared. Now, close your eyes gently. Let go of the ticking, and drift with me into a different fear, not of movement, but of fracture, when time itself splinters into memories too sharp to hold. Temporal fragmentation. There are moments in life when the clock refuses to move, not out of kindness, but from rupture. Time, once fluid like a river, now feels like broken glass, its pieces sharp, out of order, unkind. You've felt it, haven't you? After something shatters inside you, grief, panic, heartbreak, and suddenly the seconds don't march, they scatter. I swear it was only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. Someone says gently, leaning on a hospital wall, rubbing their temples, and the other replies, "I don't even remember what came first. I was just floating, then falling." This is not a poetic exaggeration. In trauma psychology, this is a documented shape of time, no longer a straight line, but a splintered mirror. It doesn't crack politely. It shatters completely. One fragment may loop endlessly, the sound of the phone call, the scream, the sirens. Another disappears entirely, like a floorboard falling through memory. And when time loses order, What happens to the story you tell yourself about who you are? If the past can't be trusted to arrive in sequence, how do we define a self? If emotion rearranges experience, does it also rewrite identity? Maybe we are less like books and more like mosaics, bits of memory, colors of emotion, slivers of stories arranged into a face that still tries to smile. Two strangers sit at a bus stop, not speaking. One offers a glance, not intrusive, just soft, like a lantern seen from a distance. Eventually, they exchange words, not questions, not facts, but this: "I didn't know time could be so loud when it's silent." And the reply comes not with certainty, but solidarity. Sometimes I think silence is just the sound of time forgetting how to behave. There's no need to fix it here. No need to glue the seconds back together. This moment is allowed to drift, even if it doesn't connect to the last. Because some nights are not made for continuity. They are made for comfort. And if you're lying in the dark now, feeling like the hours are missing their numbers, that's okay. The moon doesn't care if it's been 10 minutes or 10 months. She simply glows. Time doesn't need to be whole for healing to begin. It just needs to be kind. And now, from this scattered rhythm of broken clocks, let us float further, into a place where even time itself forgets to exist. Close your eyes if they're still open. The next paradox doesn't need a beginning, only a breath. Timelessness and the eternal now. There's a silence you feel late at night, not from the absence of noise, but from the sensation that everything has already happened. You sit quietly in your room, eyes barely open, and a strange realization flickers. What if you're not really moving forward at all? What if time isn't a river, but a landscape, and you're simply standing still, watching different hills come into view? That's the idea behind timelessness. Mystics whisper about it. Physicists nod quietly in lab coats, scribbling equations that suggest a reality more permanent than motion. In some interpretations of space-time, every event, your first breath, your last smile, even the things that haven't happened yet, already exists, nestled into the fabric of the universe. It's like holding a novel in your hands. You may be on chapter 12, but the ending is already printed, waiting, unchanging. Wait, so you're saying the future already exists? Not just the future, she says, sipping tea slowly. The past, too. It never left. We just stopped looking at it. He leans back, brow furrowed, letting her words settle. Then why do I feel like I'm always losing things? People, places, time. Because memory's a door, she replies, not a loss. If the eternal now exists, then time becomes less of a path and more of a mirror, each moment a reflection waiting for your gaze. In this view, death isn't an erasure, just a shift of attention. Love never disappears. It lingers, glowing on a page you haven't read in a while. Every choice you ever made, every breath you took, every word you whispered, it all still exists, like stars scattered across the sky. Some shine clearly, others, their light is still on its way. He turns his head toward the window. So, I'm not aging? You are, she says, but only in how you flip the pages, not in what's written on them. There's peace in this thought if you let it hold you. A quiet comfort that nothing is lost, that the people you miss are still waving at you from a different chapter, that joy, grief, youth, and age are all neighbors, living side by side in the house of time. Maybe we don't travel through life. Maybe we just remember it, one scene at a time. And if so, maybe sleep itself is a return, not to unconsciousness, but to the stillness where all moments live, where time holds its breath, where the past doesn't vanish and the future is not feared because everything is right here, soft, silent, eternal. Now, let us slip from this stillness into the paradox of reversibility, where time dares to turn backward. The Reversibility Paradox. A glass slips. It hits the tile floor and shatters into a mosaic of yesterday's breakfast and tomorrow's cleanup. And yet, if you read the equations, the math doesn't scream. It shrugs. To the laws of physics, whether time moves forward or backward is a non-issue. They work just as elegantly in reverse. But you've never watched a shattered mug reassemble itself mid-air and float back to your hand. The universe speaks two languages, it seems. One, the language of raw rules, crystalline and indifferent. The other, the murmur of human experience, and it only moves forward. "I always thought science was about what could happen," said a man once, holding his train ticket in a quiet waiting room. "But life seems to be about what didn't." His friend smiled, folding his coat across his lap. "Maybe it's about what still could, just not in reverse." You see, classical mechanics, quantum equations, even the structure of light itself, all are reversible. They describe a world that doesn't care about direction. And yet here we are, watching steam drift upward, watching faces age, watching memories collect like dust in corners we can't clean. Why? One word whispers back: entropy. Not a villain, not a curse, just the tendency for things to become more probable, more spread out, more ordinary. Entropy is the quiet accountant of the universe. It doesn't force the wine to spill, but it makes the unspilling statistically absurd. 1 billion molecules don't coordinate into miracles. They wander. And we wander too, through time, believing the past is behind us, only because we remember it. Maybe this is why we rarely rewind. There's a comfort in broken things staying broken. You're not asked to relive every mistake, only to learn from it once. A woman at a checkout line once said, "Funny how you can scan something twice by accident, but you never get to unscan." And the cashier replied, "Yeah, but at least you noticed." That's the difference. Physics might allow for reversibility, but awareness lives in one direction. Memory, loss, longing, they all face the same way. Perhaps time isn't a road. Perhaps it's a river. And while the water flows backward in theory, you only feel the drift in your skin, the current against your ankles. Entropy, then, is not the enemy. It is the frame. The reason you can watch the film instead of being stuck in its edits. So next time something breaks, let it. The beauty isn't in reversing the moment, it's in being present as it passes. Noun. Let us follow this river into deeper territory, into the core of entropy itself and the stillness it leaves in its wake. The heat. Death of the universe. What if the universe isn't destroyed in fire or torn apart in chaos, but instead just fades? No bang, no flash, no final scream. Only a long, slow exhale that never draws breath again. That's the vision offered by the heat death. A whisper at the end of time. Not a collapse, but a spreading, a dimming, a soft unraveling of everything that once danced. "It's strange," one voice murmurs, eyes fixed on the stars. "What is?" "That something so infinite could end by doing nothing at all." The other shrugs softly. "I guess silence wins, in the end." The second law of thermodynamics tells us a quiet truth. Energy flows from order to disorder, from hot to cold, from possibility to stasis. Over trillions of years, galaxies will dim, stars will burn out, and even black holes will evaporate. Entropy rises, always, and as it does, everything becomes more spread out, more even, more meaningless. Imagine the last flicker of heat in a dark corner of the universe, not because something stole it, but because everything already shared too much of itself. The cosmos will become a graveyard of particles drifting through black nothingness, too far apart to ever collide, too cold to ever ignite, too equal to ever change. And if change is the heartbeat of time, if motion, heat, and difference are what let time be felt, what happens when that beat stops? Does time itself die? Or does it continue, hollow and purposeless, ticking quietly in a universe that no longer listens? Two people walk beneath a pale sky, stars barely visible. So, everything just ends? One asks. No, the other says after a pause. Not with a bang, not with a whimper, with a stillness so complete, even silence would envy it. In this final vision, the universe becomes a museum of decay, not tragic, not violent, just still, a place where nothing happens, not because it cannot, but because it no longer needs to. Purpose melts, identity fades, even memory disappears. And yet, here's the strangest thought. In that far-off quiet, there is no pain, no war, no heartbreak, just peace, or something beyond it. Perhaps the heat death is not the end, but the deepest kind of rest. As this vision dissolves into the darkness behind your eyelids, let us drift from this slow extinguishing into the paradox that follows. One not of silence, but of echo, of loops that refuse to die, of repetition so perfect it becomes immortal. Temporal looping in consciousness. There are moments, soft, slanted moments, when your mind circles back without asking. A flicker, a sentence, a shadow you swore had already passed. You sit there wondering if you've just thought this before, or dreamt it, or dreamt that you were dreaming it, like a memory stitched into itself. Have you ever walked into a room and paused, not because you forgot, but because it felt like your feet had already made that step yesterday and tomorrow, all at once? They call it a loop. But not the kind you can see. It's silk thin and cerebral, like consciousness catching itself in the mirror of its own awareness. For some, especially those with neurological injuries, this isn't just a passing sensation. They live in moments that restart like broken records. Seconds replay, words echo, faces repeat their movements, glitching ever so slightly. Not enough to scream, just enough to shake something loose inside you. I swear she just said that. Who? My sister, in the hospital. She said I'm thirsty 10 times in a row. Same tone, same pause, same look. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she was stuck. In psychology, it's a documented phenomenon. But outside the textbooks, it feels more like the universe folding in on a single breath. Time, unthreaded, progress, suspended. You're awake, but not moving forward. And here lies the unsettling grace of it all. When your consciousness loops, is it malfunctioning? Or is it time traveling? Not across landscapes or galaxies, but across mental terrain, revisiting a neural sequence like a favorite song, or a trauma that refuses to fade. It's like your thoughts forget how to end. They just circle. One step forward, then the dance begins again. A woman once said, "I prayed for clarity, and all I got was a loop of the same prayer. Every day, word for word. I started to think maybe God was listening, but didn't know how to answer. And maybe that's what looping consciousness is, not confusion, but attention. A message you keep rereading because it hasn't yet been understood. A chapter you're not ready to leave. A breath not yet exhaled. You sit at your desk. The cursor blinks. You reach for your tea, still warm. You blink again. Same blink, same cursor. Did this already happen? Or are you just present? Some call it a glitch. Others, especially the poets, call it a haunting. But perhaps it's neither. Perhaps it's the mind's attempt to hold a moment in place. Because moving on means losing something. And looping, oddly enough, is a form of love, or fear, or both. And as you begin to drift, slowly, weightlessly, consider this. If the future is a guess and the past is a memory, maybe your mind loops not to confuse you, but to help you rest. Because maybe, just maybe, it doesn't want to let go of something yet. Let the loop soften. Let the silence stretch. You are not broken. You are here. And now, as that thought quiets, we step from the circle into stillness, into the next mystery where time doesn't repeat at all, but simply stops. Time. Freeze thought experiment. Imagine this. You're standing beneath a tree as golden light filters through the leaves. A breeze is about to touch your cheek when suddenly it all stops. No sound, no light, not even a heartbeat. But here's the strange part. You don't notice. Because noticing takes time. If time were to freeze completely, every atom would lock into place. The gentle dance of particles, the fluttering of neurons, the motion of your breath, paused in perfect stillness. But without the passage of time, what is stillness? What is awareness? Hey, have you ever thought about what would happen if time actually stopped? Like, fully stopped? No clocks ticking, no thoughts moving, just everything on pause? Exactly. Would we even know it happened? I don't think so. Noticing that time has stopped would require you to move through time to compare before and after. But if everything's frozen, there is no after. So it's like blinking inside a dream you never remember. Yeah, a moment that doesn't belong to any memory because it was never lived. This is where the paradox quietly unfurls like mist over a midnight lake. To measure time, something must change. A flicker, a thought, a heartbeat. But in a true time freeze, even the possibility of change is erased. So the very concept of a frozen moment collapses under its own stillness, trying to describe silence to someone who has never heard sound. Now imagine trying to feel a moment in which no feelings could ever arise. That's what makes this thought experiment so softly terrifying. The idea that there could be pauses in your existence that you'll never know happened. If reality blinked just for a fraction of a second and then resumed without a trace, did that blank moment exist? Does it matter if time stopped, if no mind was there to realize it? Maybe, in the spaces between moments, the universe holds its breath, and we're simply too human to notice. A soft question lingers in the still air. If time ever truly paused, would that pause be a place? A void? Or would it be like a skipped heartbeat we never remember? And now, as that thought drifts away like a dandelion in the dark, we are gently carried into another mystery. A paradox not of stillness, but of expansion, of moments so long and slow they stretch further than memory itself. Let your mind float forward. We are not done dreaming yet. The Stopwatch Illusion. There's a moment, just one breath before the car swerves, before the hand slips from the rail, before your name is called in a room full of silence, when something peculiar happens. Time, or what we think is time, seems to bend, stretch, pause. Did that really take only a second? Someone might whisper, staring into the aftermath of something that felt like it lasted forever. And yet the clock insists. Just 3 ticks. No more. In these slivers of panic or thrill, we don't slow time. We sharpen ourselves, The brain, startled by urgency, shifts into high gear, absorbing every sight, sound, and smell. That sudden focus doesn't change the seconds, it simply crams more into each one. And when we look back, that moment appears longer, because we packed it with memory. A soft voice murmurs behind you in line. Why does waiting 5 minutes feel like an hour at the dentist, but an hour with a friend feels like 5 minutes? You turn, nod. Maybe time isn't what passes. Maybe it's what we hold on to. And maybe that's the paradox. A stopwatch records time, but the soul doesn't use quartz. It uses sensation, emotion, the echo of what mattered. When you were a child and tripped on the pavement, remember how long it seemed to fall? How your hands reached out in slow motion, your thoughts racing ahead of gravity. It wasn't that time slowed, it was that you remembered more. So what is time, then, if not memory arranged into rhythm? And if fear sharpens memory, then does love soften it? Think of a quiet dinner where you forgot to look at your phone, or a long hug you didn't want to end. The moments that feel short, are they the ones we live fully, or the ones we forget to record? Someone sits beside you in a nearly empty park and gently asks, "Ever notice how sunsets feel longer when you're alone?" You smile, tracing the sky. Maybe the world knows when we need more time, and just folds the light for us. A stopwatch won't tell you that, but your heart might. Because what if the way we feel time, its depth, its stretch, its stillness, isn't a flaw in our perception, but the very signal that we're alive? If time bends in fear, expands in joy, shrinks in routine, then it's not an enemy, or a rule, or a countdown. It's a mirror, a quiet witness. And sometimes, it whispers the truth not through numbers, but through how vividly we remember. So now, as the ticking fades into stillness, we descend gently into a more peculiar puzzle, where time no longer stretches forward, but instead turns around to knock on its own past. Let us go now, softly, into the eerie quiet of backward causality. Retrocausality. What if your future could reach back and touch your past? In the hushed language of quantum physics, there exists a theory so soft and strange, it sounds like a bedtime secret. Retrocausality. The idea that events happening now, in this very breath, might influence what already happened. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, but at the level of the particles that make up our bones and breath. As if the universe doesn't just remember, it listens in reverse. Late one night, as a fan hummed softly in the background, two friends sat talking beneath a sleepy porch light. "So you're telling me," she said, sipping her tea slowly, "that what I choose tonight could change what already happened last year?" He nodded, smiling, not with certainty, but with wonder. "I'm saying, some physicists think reality might be more flexible than we were ever told. That time doesn't just flow forward like a river. Maybe it loops, maybe it tangles, maybe it folds back on itself like soft fabric." She shook her head, half laughing. "That sounds like a bad science fiction movie." "Maybe," he replied. "Or maybe it's just a truth we're too used to ignoring. In the world of quantum entanglement, where two particles separated by space still mirror each other instantly, some interpretations suggest retrocausality might explain the mysterious behavior. When a scientist measures one particle, the other reacts as though the information traveled back through time to prepare it. Not after, before. If this holds true, then the entire architecture of time, the neat arrow from past to present to future, might be nothing more than a comforting illusion. Time would not be a line, but a shimmering web. And in that web, The future isn't waiting quietly. It's pulling, subtly shaping what has already unfolded. Pause for a moment here. Take a slow breath. Think about the choices you've made recently, the ones that felt instinctual, surprising, or out of character. What if they weren't random? What if they were guided not by your past, but by a quiet tug from the future? A whisper you couldn't hear, but followed anyway? He looked at her again. You ever get that feeling that something was meant to happen? Not because it was always going to, but because something ahead of you needed it? She paused, the breeze brushing her cheek like memory. Like déjà vu, but in reverse? Exactly, he whispered. And so the paradox blooms. If the future shapes the past, then what becomes of free will? Are we puppets of what's to come? Or co-authors of a story that loops and rewrites itself as we move through it? In this vision of time, cause and effect don't live in a line. They live in a loop, constantly rewriting the script. Fate is not behind us like a shadow. It's in front of us like a light, bending time's path to ensure we arrive where we're needed. As we sink deeper into this dream of entangled hours, let us drift now into the trembling question of fate itself. Where does freedom begin when the future already knows your name? The paradox of free will and time. Somewhere between midnight thoughts and morning's edge, there's a question that drifts in like mist over still water. Did I choose this life, or did it choose me? You've probably felt it. Standing at a crossroads in your day, small or large. One path is coffee, the other is tea. One text sent, another unsent. The subtle weight of consequence hidden in moments so ordinary, they almost feel empty. And yet, each one links like dominoes to a future you can't see. A soft voice at the bookstore once said, "Funny how I ended up here, just 5 minutes late, and somehow you're the one in line ahead of me. Maybe the universe has strange timing." He smiled, but behind it was that lingering sense. Was it timing or fate? Philosophers have danced with this dilemma for centuries. If every cause leads to an effect, like gears in a clock, then where is the room for freedom? If every thought you have today was shaped by something before it, genes, memories, yesterday's rain, how could any choice truly be yours? But then there's the quantum whisper, a sliver of unpredictability tucked deep inside the laws of nature. The kind that says, even if you run the universe twice, the outcomes might not match. A flip of a subatomic coin, a deviation, a doorway. Maybe this is where freedom lives, not in controlling the path, but in the grace with which we walk it. Not in rewriting time's script, but in choosing how we read the lines. Not in shouting, "I decide," but in gently accepting, "I am here now." A mother once told her son, "I didn't plan everything right, but I chose to love you fully once you arrived." That wasn't fate or physics. That was will, quiet, lived, and human. You might wonder, does it matter if the end is already written? If every choice is already inscribed in a script too vast to hold? But here's a softer truth. The beauty isn't in rewriting the stars. It's in knowing that you are the one watching them shine, even if they've always shone that way. And maybe, just maybe, free will isn't about the choices at all. Maybe it's about the presence within them, the awareness, the breath, the heartbeat before saying yes. Two strangers at a train station once locked eyes as the last car pulled in. No words, no plan, just a shared decision to smile. And somehow, that made the moment feel like it was theirs. Let go if your mind begins to spiral. There's no need to solve this paradox tonight. It's okay not to know where freedom ends and causality begins. You're not here to map the entire maze, just to walk it, gently. And now, as thoughts slow like footsteps on soft earth, we drift toward a stranger illusion, the feeling that time moves faster or slower, depending on who you are and where you stand. Temporal subjectivity. Do you remember how long a summer felt when you were a child? The sun lingered in the sky like it was in no rush to leave. Afternoons stretched endlessly. 1 hour felt like 3. Running barefoot on warm pavement, catching fireflies in jam jars, you were living inside a season that felt eternal. And then, somewhere along the way, something changed. You grew up. Summers grew shorter. Years began to collapse into flashes. One December melts into the next. Time, once a slow companion, now rushes ahead, barely giving you space to breathe. Isn't it weird how time felt longer when we were kids? Yeah, now it just slips through my fingers. Maybe it's not time that changed. Maybe it's us. Time doesn't tick the same for everyone, not really. Sure, the clocks on our walls march uniformly, 1 second at a time. But inside us, time is fluid. It's a soft current that moves faster or slower depending on the tide of our emotions. When we are bored, an hour becomes a lifetime. But in joy, in love, in laughter, moments vanish like mist. Think of grief, how a single day in mourning can feel as heavy as a year. Or heartbreak, where each minute stretches like elastic, pulling pain across an endless string. Now think of being in flow, fully immersed in what you're doing. Time disappears. You forget to check your phone. You forget the clock exists. And perhaps, in those moments, you are most alive. So what if time isn't just measured by seconds, but by how deeply we feel them? A child's perception of time is drawn in wide brushstrokes, unhurried. They are present, awake. Every minute is new, filled with discovery. But as we age, routine dulls time's edges. We know what comes next. The novelty fades, and so does our sense of slowness. I wish weekends felt as long as they did in middle school. Maybe they still could, if we let ourselves actually be in them. There's something quietly profound in this thought, that how we live determines how time lives in us. A busy adult racing through tasks may have more hours, but a mindful child watching ants crawl might be richer in moments. We often crave more time, but maybe what we really long for is a deeper taste of the time we already have. Is happiness then a temporal illusion? Not the possession of time, but the perception of it. To slow time, we might not need to stop the clock, but to open our senses, to notice the rustle of leaves, the warmth of tea, the way light dances on a wall in late afternoon. These are not grand events, but they are rich with time, and they remind us we are not prisoners of the hour. We are its artists. So perhaps the question is not, how much time do I have, but how vividly am I living it? As we rest in this realization, our breath slows, the room softens, the rush of days becomes a river we can gently float upon, and from the soft whisper of feelings and flow, we drift now toward something colder, more rigid. Machines, ticking, measuring, trying to tame the untamable. But no machine can ever feel a moment the way we do. Let's follow this thread into the world of timekeepers. The atomic clock paradox. There's something quietly beautiful about a machine that listens to atoms. Tick by tick, an atomic clock counts time, not with gears or sand, but with the gentle hum of cesium atoms vibrating in perfect rhythm. It's precise, impossibly so. down to the billionth of a second. But what if even perfection needs correction? You ever notice the clock in the elevator always runs a little fast? One man mutters to the other, half smiling as they ride the steel box upward. I thought it was just my tired eyes. The other replies, but maybe time moves faster between floors. They laugh, but neither is fully joking, because the truth, oddly enough, is that they're right. Take that atomic clock, so perfect in the lab. Place it on a mountaintop and it ticks a little faster. Drop it into a valley and it slows. Launch it into orbit on a satellite and it bends again, adjusting for the dance between speed and gravity. Time, it seems, sways with the music of the universe, and the instruments that play it must tune themselves constantly or fall out of sync. It's humbling, isn't it? Even our most sophisticated creations, born from decades of genius and refinement, must yield to invisible forces. The higher you go, the more quickly time whispers forward. The faster you move, the more it resists. We thought we were measuring time, but perhaps time is measuring us, constantly asking, where are you standing now, and how fast are you fleeing the past? A woman once told me her favorite clock was the one above her grandmother's stove, always 5 minutes late. She never fixed it. It made me feel like I had time, she said, like the world could wait just a little. And that's the paradox. These clocks we build to chase time sometimes give us the illusion we can catch it. But if time bends with gravity and dances with motion, then maybe it's less like a ruler and more like a language, each clock a dialect, each vibration a translation, always interpreting, never universal. Do you think time feels the same on the moon? Maybe it's lonelier there, came the answer. Maybe it takes longer to miss someone. In this paradox, we're not just observers, we're participants. Every movement, every change in position, subtly alters the tempo of our hours, like a song that slows or speeds with the turn of your head. So if even the most precise clocks must be corrected, then perhaps it's not the clock that is wrong, but our craving for constancy. We want time to be stable, but maybe time is only ever real in relation to us. And maybe that's okay. You're doing just fine, wherever you are. Let time adjust for you tonight. If your moments feel too fast or too slow, that's not a mistake. That's your place in the rhythm, a gentle variance in the song of the cosmos. Now, let your breath fall into that rhythm, and as your mind drifts, we move into a stranger entanglement still, where two particles, split by space, share a single clock and never let go. Quantum entanglement and non-local time. Do you remember those childhood moments when you just knew someone was thinking of you? A tug in your chest, a random smile, and then your phone rang. I was just about to call you, they'd say. What if that feeling wasn't imagination, but entanglement? Quantum entanglement defies everything we think we know about how information travels. Two particles, even light years apart, can become so deeply connected that a change to one instantly affects the other. Not fast, instant. Einstein, skeptical as ever, grumbled and called it spooky action at a distance. It offended his sense of order. How could something leap across the galaxy without time or space getting in the way? But entanglement does just that, and it whispers a terrifying possibility. That time, as we know it, may not exist the way we experience it. One night, under a starless sky, a woman named Claire murmured to her partner, "Do you think we're still connected to people we've let go of?" "You mean like soul ties?" he said, eyes half closed. No, like, what if part of them is still tangled with us, like in quantum physics? He smiled. If so, I hope the part of me entangled with you never collapses. Entanglement doesn't allow messages to travel faster than light. Not directly. It doesn't enable time machines or teleporters. At least, not yet. But it does something even stranger. It hints that everything might be more connected than we thought. That under the surface of time, space, and light speed limits, there is a trembling thread of immediacy, where change leaps like lightning crossing the void. Imagine two particles born in the same cosmic cradle. One is sent to the edge of the observable universe. The other stays here on Earth. Touch one, and the other responds instantly. No delay, no waiting. As if they never really left each other. Now ask yourself, if they are not truly apart, what does that say about distance? And if they respond instantly, what does that say about time? Perhaps time isn't linear. Perhaps it isn't even smooth. Maybe, instead of a river, it behaves like thunder, silent, then sudden. Maybe it leaps, cracks, and folds in places we cannot see. Entanglement offers a vision of time not as a line, but as a shimmer. Not a path, but a pattern. In dreams, we often leap from moment to moment, without transition, without delay. A house becomes a forest. A smile becomes a storm. And somehow, we accept it. Maybe our subconscious is closer to quantum time than we know. Claire stirred again. So, if you and I are still entangled, could that explain why I sometimes feel you even when you're miles away? Maybe, he whispered. Or maybe love is just the universe's most beautiful version of quantum physics. In that quiet moment, they didn't need to understand the math. Because entanglement isn't about knowing. It's about feeling the invisible thread between things that should be separate, but aren't. And so, we drift gently from this cosmic leap into a quieter mystery still. One where time bends not from distance, but from motion. Let's fall with grace into that next paradox, where speed and stillness stretch the seconds, and aging becomes a question of how fast you move through time. The twin paradox. There's something quietly haunting about the thought of coming home and finding that the years have passed more quickly for the people you love than for you. You were only gone a little while, or so it felt. But when you return, they're older. Their voices have deepened. Their hair has silvered. And somehow, you're the same, as if time itself spared you, out of some cosmic kindness or cruel mistake. In Einstein's realm of special relativity, speed does more than blur the scenery. It bends time. A twin who leaves Earth, soaring through space near the speed of light, will experience time more slowly than the one who stays behind. And when they meet again, one will have lived fewer days, though neither skipped a moment. Late one evening, in a quiet coffee shop near a train station, two strangers, one reading, the other just arriving, happened to share a table. "You look tired," the first one said gently. "I feel like I've traveled for years," the second replied. "But my watch says otherwise." "Maybe it's not your watch that's lying," the first one smiled. "Maybe it's time itself." Their laughter was soft, like the sound of shoes on wet pavement. But beneath it, something lingered, an awareness that what we feel as time isn't just about seconds ticking by. It's about what we remember and what we miss. So is age a number or a memory? Is a wrinkle proof of time or just proof of experience? Could someone younger have lived more simply by moving slower, by staying still long enough to feel everything? If motion stretches time, then maybe stillness deepens it. The traveler rushes forward and finds the years shorten. The one who waits fills the silence with meaning. And yet, neither twin is wrong. Both have lived truly, just differently. There's a quiet ache in that kind of truth. The kind you feel when you hear a voicemail from a voice that no longer calls. Or when a friend says, "Was it really 5 years ago?" And you realize it feels like one. Even when no spaceship is involved, we all experience time like twins in separate orbits. One chasing dreams, one holding memories, one rushing forward, one rooted in place. Neither path guarantees more life, just a different kind of living. At the heart of the paradox lies not confusion, but choice. The kind that whispers at midnight when you're staring at a ceiling that won't let you sleep. Maybe the real question isn't, which twin is older? Maybe it's, which one lived closer to their truth? And in the hush that follows, you might feel a gentle pull inward, like sleep coming not as an escape, but as an embrace of all your versions, traveling at different speeds, yet arriving in this moment, together. Now, as you drift deeper, we leave the space between two hearts and step into the mirror of the mind itself, where identity is no longer fixed, and each choice might create a self you've never met. Branching selves in divergent timelines, you stand at a crossroad, just one of life's many. You look left, then right, you choose left. But somewhere, in a version of reality you cannot see, another you chooses right, and yet another simply pauses. According to some interpretations of quantum mechanics, every choice you make splits the universe, carving new timelines where alternate versions of yourself continue living lives you never did. "I wonder," she said softly, stirring her tea as moonlight scattered across the countertop, "what if there's a version of me that never left him?" He looked up from the book in his lap. "And what if there's one who never met him at all? Do they still carry your pain? Maybe. Or maybe they carry joys I've never tasted." This is the paradox of the branching self. If each quantum possibility becomes real in another thread of the cosmos, then we are not one self, but a constellation, a vast web of versions flickering through divergent timelines. One version of you may be a painter, another, a lonely traveler. Somewhere, you're still a child, and somewhere else, already old. But if these other yous exist, where do you end? Are you only the version breathing in this moment? Or do you stretch across multiverses, fragmented, yet bound by some deeper essence? And what of regret? If the self who failed is mirrored by one who succeeded, does that make your sorrow less real or more unbearable? To know that in a parallel strand the apology was spoken, the train was caught, the love was saved. He glanced at her again. "Do you think one of me out there never left the bookstore that day and met you?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe one of me walked in sooner and didn't hesitate." The thought soothes and stings, like a lullaby that mourns and comforts in the same breath. Because if other selves exist, we're never truly alone. But we're never fully whole either. Still, perhaps peace is not in collapsing all timelines into one, but in holding your version gently. In this life, this brief flicker, you are here, you are real, not perfect, not complete, but present. Let us leave the branches of identity and listen closely. In the quiet between one heartbeat and the next, something even more mysterious stirs. A space not filled with selves, but silence. A question without a version. A pause in time itself. Let us drift into that pause and see what, if anything, lives there. Planck Time. a breath held too long, a blink stretched beyond its limits. But even then, you are still a million eternities away from the smallest tick of the universe. Planck Time, roughly 1/10,000,000,000,000,000,000,000th of a second. Not just small, not just quick, but a boundary, a wall. Beneath it, the rules we know crumble. Equations that hold up stars begin to scatter. Space and time, once separate dancers, collapse into one silent blur. You can't observe it. You can't experience it. But it may be the heartbeat behind everything that is. Do you ever think the world feels glitchy sometimes? She asked that while stirring her tea, eyes half lost in the rising steam. He looked up from his book, slow to answer. Maybe. But maybe it's not a glitch. Maybe it's just us noticing the frame rate of reality. That's what some physicists believe. Our lives aren't a smooth river, but a flickering sequence, a reel of still moments stitched together by memory, motion, and meaning. And between each stitch, silence, like the gaps between stars, the pauses in breath, the spaces between words. Planck Time doesn't just set the tempo of the cosmos. It dares to ask, is continuity real? Or are we just riding a flickering dream, stitched too fast to notice the seams? Think of it. If time is made of discrete bits, then every kiss, every choice, every fall may not be a flow, but a series of tiny leaps. Not a line, but a dotted trail through the void. He held his phone up toward the night sky. Do you think stars experience time the way we do? She shook her head, smiling. Maybe they're just light caught between Planck seconds, waiting to be noticed. And just like that, they sat in stillness. Not because time had paused, but because they finally noticed how chopped and delicate it really was, as though they were walking across a field of invisible stepping stones, never truly touching time, only gliding from one sliver to the next. If there is a floor to time, a lowest note the universe can play, then maybe we've never heard the full song. Maybe what we call now is just a blur of intervals, like the flicker of a candle seen in the reflection of water. But here's the comfort. Even if time is pixelated, your experience is whole. Even if the world moves in jumps, your heart glides. And even if nothing is truly smooth, you still find rhythm. So if your thoughts tonight feel scattered, like flickers in the dark, let them. That's how the universe works too. One flicker, then another, until meaning emerges from the blur. Now rest your mind on this final breath. Let each second stretch. Let each silence widen, and follow me into a place where time itself dissolves, and something older, gentler, eternal takes its place. The timelessness of God and eternity. In the quiet of night, when seconds feel like whispers and the stars blink slowly overhead, a question gently rises like mist from the surface of an undisturbed lake. What if God exists outside of time? Not simply older than time, or eternal in the way we often use the word, but utterly beyond it, never moving, never changing, not bound by beginnings or ends. This idea, woven through countless spiritual traditions, has puzzled both mystics and physicists alike. And tonight, it hovers here beside us, asking not to be solved, but to be felt. Do you think God feels time like we do? One voice asks softly in the darkness. Maybe not at all, the other replies. Maybe to God, every moment is always now, like watching every sunrise all at once. To call something timeless is not to strip it of emotion, but to say it is complete, whole, beyond the trembling of hours and the sorrow of endings. In many sacred texts, God is described as I am, not I was, not I will be, but I am, a constant, burning stillness, a presence unmoved by clocks, untouched by centuries, yet that raises a gentle ache within us. If God is so far beyond the ticking of our lives, can He understand the pain of waiting, the fear of running out of time, the grief of goodbye? It feels like the difference between a falling leaf and the mountain it drifts past. The mountain sees the leaf fall, but does it feel the fall? Or is it too still, too large, too ancient to bend close? And yet, maybe timelessness isn't absence. Maybe it's intimacy, not removed, but fully enveloping. Maybe what feels like distance is actually depth, because to be outside of time is to never miss a moment, to be present at every birth, every prayer, every cry, not just in memory, but in reality. I think, the first voice murmurs, that if God is timeless, then He's with me, not just in this second, but in every second I've ever lived, all at once. That's not cold, the other says. That's overwhelming, like being known completely, forever. Perhaps what we call eternity isn't endless time, but no time at all, a space where nothing can be lost because nothing ever leaves, where wounds don't need to be healed because they were never separated from love to begin with, where God doesn't watch from afar, but is already there in the center of your most fragile breath, not before it, not after it, but always within it. So when you cry out into the dark and feel no answer come quickly, remember this: delay is a thing of time, but perhaps the answer, the comfort, the presence is already there, waiting in the stillness, outside the rush, in the eternal quiet that never began and never ends. Now breathe. The hands of the clock grow soft. The ticking fades. You are safe. As we drift forward into the next wonder, where even time itself begins to question what it is, we leave behind the trembling edge of chronology and step gently into the mystery of timeless love. Temporal Solipsism. Somewhere between the fading tick of a clock and the weightless drift of thought, there arises a strange question. So quiet, so close, it nearly sounds like your own breath. What if only this moment is real? A train hums outside the window. A spoon clinks gently against ceramic. But where were you 2 hours ago? Or 2 years? You remember, don't you? But what is memory, if not just a whisper the present moment tells itself, softly enough that you almost believe it came from somewhere else? Temporal solipsism. It suggests that only the now, this immediate flicker of being, is true. Everything else may be beautifully composed fiction, not lies, not delusion, just narrative. A stage play we perform for ourselves, with yesterday's costume still warm and tomorrow's lines rehearsed but never truly spoken. A woman on the bus asked today, "Do you ever feel like everything before this was just rehearsal?" Her companion blinked, smiled, and replied, "Not rehearsal. More like reading a story someone else already wrote, and I'm just catching up." This notion doesn't accuse. It doesn't try to unravel your memories. It simply wonders if time, as we know it, may be more like a flashlight beam, one narrow slice of light illuminating the dark room of existence. You move the beam forward and call it progress. You glance behind and call it memory. But the only space ever lit is now. And if that's true, if the rest of time sits unlit like a vast theater before the curtain rises, then who's watching you perform? Are we all alone in our spotlights, clinging to what feels most tangible? The warmth of a teacup, the way the air smells just before rain, the moment someone calls your name in just the right tone? And yet, this idea is oddly comforting. Because if the now is all that exists, then nothing is too late, nothing is lost. All regrets melt into static if they never existed in the first place. Only the breath you take now, only the word you choose now matters. There was a man at the library once, asking the clerk a question not even about books. "What time is it?" he said. The clerk looked at the clock, then hesitated. "Right now," she said slowly. "It's the only time there is." And they both laughed, but it stayed with him. Maybe with her, too. This thought doesn't need to be answered. It's not a riddle to solve, but a rhythm to feel, like the hush between piano notes, or the way your chest rises when you're about to say something that matters. So let go of chasing yesterday. Let go of worrying about whether tomorrow will arrive in the shape you expected. You're already standing on the only solid ground time ever offers. The present. And strangely, it's enough. From this tender spotlight, the moment where memory and anticipation dissolve, we now drift deeper, toward the spirals that repeat beneath history, where time begins to echo itself like footsteps in a long, empty hallway. The spiral of historical recurrence. Some nights, when the wind brushes against the windows just right and the world is silent enough to hear your own breathing, you might wonder, are we truly moving forward, or are we simply walking in a circle too vast to notice? History has always been a mirror. But what if it's more than a mirror? What if it's a spiral staircase? One where each revolution brings us back to a place we've seen before, only slightly higher, slightly wiser, or perhaps only slightly different. Heraclitus once said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice." And yet, Nietzsche dared to dream of eternal recurrence, the idea that life plays out again and again in endless loops. Hegel, too, saw history moving not in a straight line, but in thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, an ongoing dance of ideas repeating in familiar rhythms. "I feel like we've been here before," she whispered, lying beside him as they watched the news flicker on the screen. Another protest, another war, another leader rising with a promise in a clenched fist. He nodded slowly. It's like the past never really leaves. It just wears new clothes. These moments, whether in history books or quiet conversations, reveal something haunting. Revolutions echo revolutions. Empires rise and fall with eerily similar pride and blindness. Even the Renaissance, that brilliant rebirth of art and reason, emerged from the shadows of medieval forgetting, like sunlight reclaiming a forgotten field. But maybe this isn't pure repetition. Maybe it's transformation. Maybe history is not a circle, but a spiral. And just like a spiral staircase, we may find ourselves passing the same points again, wars, revolts, awakenings, but we do so at different heights, with different tools, different memories, different eyes. "Do you think we ever really learn?" she asked. "Maybe not all at once," he replied. "But maybe we remember a little more each time. Maybe that's enough." So then the question shifts. Are we prisoners of the past, shackled to the archetypes of hero and villain, victim and redeemer, fated to reenact the same roles with only the stage props changed? Or do we carry the weight of history so that we can choose, in each spiral loop, to do better? The answer is probably both. Like echoes inside a canyon, some moments repeat because we haven't yet listened. Others perhaps return like old friends, familiar not to haunt, but to teach. So tonight, as you close your eyes and feel the centuries drifting gently past your thoughts, know this: time may repeat, but you are not the same person who met it the last time. You are a little more awake now, a little more aware. And maybe that's what makes the spiral rise instead of circle. Now, let your breath slow. For we are about to step into a different kind of loop, a paradox of anticipation, where merely imagining the future becomes its own way of touching it. Mental time travel. A cold breeze touches your cheek, and suddenly you're not here anymore. You're 5, chasing falling leaves with outstretched hands, or you're 65, holding a grandchild who hasn't yet been born. Your body stays in place, but your mind, it vanishes through corridors time itself forgot to lock. Chronophobia. That's the word. Not just memory, not just imagination, but the rare ability to mentally stretch beyond the now, to visit a past that echoes or a future that whispers. And perhaps in quiet moments like this, that ability is not a glitch in human design, but its signature. There's something oddly human in the way we sit in silence, and yet find ourselves reliving a moment from high school so vividly we tense our shoulders, or rehearsing a conversation that may never come, shaping it like wet clay until it feels real enough to leave us breathless. The brain, it seems, is not content to simply be. It wants to travel. 2 people share a park bench at sunset. One leans back with a sigh. You ever talk to someone in your head just to get it right? The other smiles, their gaze distant. Every night before bed, it's like rewinding life or fast-forwarding it, just to feel some control. This mental movement is not bound by physics. There's no gravity in a memory, no friction in a daydream. And yet, our heart beats faster, our body warms, our breath shortens, all as if we're really there. A broken promise can still sting. A future kiss can still comfort. The clock ticks forward, but inside us, timelines blur. And so, we carry entire worlds in our minds, not as passengers, but as architects. We revise our history to protect ourselves. We build ideal futures to give ourselves reason. And even when we know the past can't be changed, or the future can't be guaranteed, we keep returning to them, over and over, like waves returning to shore. But here's the hidden truth. When we revisit pain, we reopen its door. When we rehearse joy, we teach ourselves to hope. And somewhere between regret and anticipation, we quietly begin to live not in one time, but many. In this way, thoughts become our true timekeepers, not seconds, not calendars, not stars. There's a gentle rain outside your window now, or maybe only in your mind. The sound of it folds over itself like layers of memory. And perhaps that's the gift of it all. Not escaping time, but learning to dance within it. So if your thoughts drift again tonight, to that moment that bruised you, or the one that still glows like a lantern inside you, don't resist it. You're not broken for traveling there. You're simply human, software elastic, brilliant, and noun. We drift softly onward toward the next question. Does time need direction or only rhythm? The arrow of time. Have you ever tried to unspill a cup of coffee, watched shattered glass reassemble itself, piece by trembling piece, in reverse? Of course not. The world doesn't seem to work that way. There's a softness to our observations of time, a quiet insistence that things only go one direction. We age, we remember, we move forward. This feeling is what scientists call the arrow of time, a concept sewn delicately into the fabric of our experience, though curiously absent from the core laws of physics. In the equations that govern our universe, Newton's motion, Schrödinger's wave, Einstein's curvature, time can move forward or backward without contradiction. The math doesn't care which way we go, and yet, life does. You wake each morning older, not younger. Bread becomes toast, but toast never becomes bread again. This irreversible flow seems intuitive, almost obvious, but the deeper we explore it, the more mysterious it becomes. Two voices linger in a dim-lit kitchen, the last echoes of evening clinking against cold ceramic. Why do things always break but never unbreak? One asks, staring at a shattered plate on the floor. The other shrugs gently, sweeping pieces into their palm. Maybe because breaking spreads energy out. It's easier, more natural. Or maybe it's just us, the first voice replies. Maybe time only moves that way because we remember it like that. That's where entropy steps into the scene, silent and omnipresent. Entropy is the measure of disorder, the idea that systems tend toward chaos rather than order. And it gives time a sense of flow, a push toward more randomness. A neat room becomes cluttered, a hot drink cools, a memory fades. But even here, the math doesn't force this behavior. It's only when we add initial conditions, a low entropy beginning, a cosmos freshly born in order, that the arrow becomes visible. So perhaps time isn't really moving. Perhaps it's standing still, and we are the ones flowing through it, our minds carrying the illusion of progress, like a boat pulled downstream by a current we cannot see. We know the past because we store it, fragments of sensation, sound, and sight. But we cannot store the future, so it remains hidden, silent. Maybe that's all the arrow of time is, memory, tangled with entropy, wrapped around awareness. Another moment in that same kitchen. Do you think time ever runs backward, somewhere else? A pause, then a whisper of a smile. Maybe. Or maybe it's just us here, with one-way eyes. There's something soothing about the thought that the arrow of time might not be real, at least not in the way we imagine it. That behind the scenes, the universe is far more fluid, more symmetrical, more open-ended, but it also leaves us gently uneasy. If the laws allow for reversals, for mirrored dances of particles and possibilities, then why don't we ever feel them? Why does every goodbye stay said? Why does every wrinkle remain? And so, we drift, not in a straight line, but along a soft arc of understanding, from broken dishes to fading stars, from old photos to newborn cries. The arrow of time guides our hearts even if it's not written in the stars. And from here, with our eyes half closed and breath slowing, we begin to imagine not the direction, but the distortion. As time loops, bends and tangles just beyond the veil of sleep. Time loops and causal knots. You ever feel like you've lived a moment before? Not just similar, but exactly the same. A scent in the air, the rhythm of footsteps, a certain glance from a stranger. Like life skipped backward and started again, only you're the only one who knows. Time loops are more than science fiction's favorite trick. They are mental echoes, tight coils in the mind where memories get caught like leaves in a whirlpool. In some theories, these loops aren't fiction at all, but potential features of reality. A moment that folds in on itself, an event that births its own beginning, a cause that is also its consequence. Isn't it odd? Someone once whispered to their friend while waiting in a slow cafe line. How déjà vu doesn't just feel familiar, but scripted? Like I'm following a line I didn't write. Her friend smiled, stirring cream into coffee that had long gone cold. Maybe you did write it, just not here, not now. Causal knots in physics and philosophy are like time's mischief. Loops where cause and effect twist into a closed loop, with no clear start and no true end. Picture a book with its last page seamlessly sewn back into the first, so that no matter how often you read it, the story always begins again. If time is shaped like a loop, does anything ever really begin? Or is every beginning just a replay of a forgotten ending? Maybe you were never born in the usual way, but nudged yourself into existence. A thought you had, planted in your own future. There's a quiet strangeness in thinking that your choices could be both consequences and causes, that your fear of being late could be why you set the alarm, and the alarm, ringing in the dark, could be what taught you to fear lateness in the first place. Round and round, with no first beat to the drum. In such a world, words like before and after lose their teeth. What remains is experience, raw, looping, lived. Sometimes that looks like habit, other times like regret, or longing, or a conversation replayed in your mind so often it starts to feel like it never actually stopped. One evening, a man sat quietly on a subway train, hands folded on his lap. Across from him, a young boy asked his mother, "Why do we keep coming back to the same station?" The mother replied, "Because the train has to turn around." The boy nodded, unconvinced. But what if it didn't? What if it just kept going in circles forever? The man, eyes closed, smiled faintly. It was a good question. In time loops, freedom becomes a curious thing. Are we repeating because we choose to, or because we forgot how to stop? If you're the cause of your own origin, are you the author of your fate or its prisoner, walking the same hallway forever, thinking each step is new? The truth may not be in the loop itself, but in our awareness of it. The moment we notice the repetition, that subtle click of recognition, we open a door, a chance to shift, to observe the knot and perhaps loosen it. So if you're lying there now, tracing the same thought again and again, don't rush to untangle it. Let it spiral gently. The loop is not your enemy. It might just be a cradle, rocking you back and forth until you drift beyond its rhythm. And now, quietly, like a thread slipping free from its knot, we enter stranger ground, where time might change not because of what happened, but because of who is watching it. The Participatory Universe. Close your eyes and feel the weight of being seen, not by a person, not by a crowd, but by the universe itself. John Wheeler, a towering mind in modern physics, once proposed a quietly unsettling idea, the participatory anthropic principle. In simpler terms, it means this: without observers like us, the universe may not fully exist. That we, just by looking, by noticing, by being aware, help shape reality. As if the cosmos itself is a great canvas, and each act of attention splashes paint onto the void. But what does that mean for time? Think of it like this. You're walking through a forest, leaves rustle, light filters through branches. You feel the breeze brush your skin. Now imagine the same forest, empty of all life, still and untouched. If no one sees the light fall on the leaves, did it ever truly happen? If no one remembers the moment, can time claim it? A gentle voice breaks the stillness. Do you think the stars still shine if no one's looking? A second voice replies, softer, curious. Maybe, but maybe they wait to be seen, like a play needing an audience. It's a strange idea, that the universe may need witnesses. That time itself might be incomplete without someone there to trace its flow, like ink only spreading when eyes watch the page. According to Wheeler, the universe isn't just out there, ticking away independently. Instead, it's something woven together with our awareness, as if the cosmos gently unfolds one frame at a time, in response to our gaze. This doesn't mean the stars spin around you, or that everything is some illusion. It means something far more humbling. You are part of the equation. not just a passive viewer, but a co-author. The ticking of the clock, the falling of a leaf, the rise of a distant sun, all of it may be waiting for your eyes, your heart, your mind to give it meaning. And if this is true, if time itself requires attention to flow, then the present becomes sacred. Each second, not just a tick on a timeline, but a moment you helped bring into being. Maybe this is why some memories feel heavier, more vivid, why some moments shimmer in our minds long after they've passed. It wasn't just that they happened, it was that you witnessed them. So tonight, as your thoughts soften and your breath deepens, rest in this quiet truth. You are not separate from time. You are one of its instruments, its eyes, its gentle sculptors. And from this sacred collaboration between you and the cosmos, we drift forward, into stranger waters still, toward the possibility that not one, but many timelines unfold beside us, waiting to be seen. Multiple temporal dimensions. The streetlight flickers as if it breathes. A woman steps off the curb and pauses, not because the road is busy, but because for a moment she feels something brush past her soul. Not wind, not memory, something else, like a direction she can't name. What if that wasn't just poetic? What if time doesn't only move forward like a river, but bends and forks like a field of invisible trails? Some physicists say time may not be one straight line at all, but a multi-lane highway curving through a vast landscape we've never truly mapped. If space can have height, width, and depth, why should time settle for only one direction? Some theories go deeper, suggesting that time might hold more than just past, present, and future. It might stretch sideways, spiral upward, fold inward. It may bloom like a rose, petals curling into dimensions that our senses can't touch. We experience one slice of it, like walking through a dense forest, seeing only the path ahead. But what if the forest itself has layers, and time walks among the trees in ways we'll never quite follow? Hey, did you just come out of the museum too? A stranger asks, falling into step beside you. You pause. You hadn't been in a museum, or had you? The sense of déjà vu wraps around your chest like silk, thin, familiar, impossible. You laugh. No, I don't think so. Why do you ask? They smile, almost shy. You just look like someone who'd seen something, older than it should be. In multiple temporal dimensions, perhaps memories aren't behind us. Perhaps they brush past us sideways, touching the skin like a cool draft from a door we didn't open. Maybe choice isn't a fork in the road, but a ripple across a flat surface. What you pick, what you regret, what you become, these might all be expressions of motion through time's unseen corridors. Could destiny simply be the echo of your footsteps in a time dimension you can't yet hear? You sit down on a wooden bench. The grain beneath your hand is soft, worn by years of fingers that may not have belonged to you. A man passing by nods and says, "Strange weather, huh?" Feels like the air remembers something, and you nod back, not because it makes sense, but because something in your bones agrees. In dreams, sometimes, we walk into places we've never been and feel we've returned. Could these be whispers from time's hidden halls? Maybe we're not just pulled forward by clocks, but nudged sideways by truths we've forgotten how to feel. Maybe your intuition is a compass for a time dimension you've always known existed, but were never taught to name. If this is true, then what is free will? Perhaps it's a thread through a temporal tapestry you're only touching with one hand. And memory? Could it be the footprint of a journey made in reverse, a path curved back from one of time's hidden slopes? The night deepens, lights dim, thought slows, and now, we stop asking time to move. Because next, we explore time, not as something that passes, but something that takes shape. The block universe theory. What if everything you've ever done and everything you ever will already exists, quietly etched into the structure of the cosmos? This is not a dream of fate, but a radical shift in how we understand time itself. The block universe theory proposes that time is not a river flowing forward, but a solid landscape, unchanging, ever there, waiting for us to pass through it. "Do you remember the day we first met?" she asked, fingers wrapped around her mug, steam curling into the silence. "Yeah," he smiled, eyes soft. "Feels like yesterday." "But what if it still is yesterday?" she whispered. He raised an eyebrow. "You mean like it's still happening somewhere?" "Not somewhere. Everywhen. In the block universe, time behaves not like a sequence, but like space. Imagine a vast sculpture, a frozen tapestry of moments. Your first breath, a laugh you haven't laughed yet, the last time you'll look at the sky. All of it exists, not as ghosts or predictions, but as concrete parts of a four-dimensional reality. We're not carving the path, we're tracing it, like a needle threading through a tapestry already woven. In this vision, the future is not a mystery waiting to unfold, but a destination on a map already drawn. We aren't creating the road as we walk, we're just walking it, moment by moment. There is no becoming, only being. It's unsettling, isn't it? That the idea of change could be an illusion, that the feeling of progress might be nothing more than our consciousness moving along a fixed track. Like a film strip already developed, we experience each frame in order, unaware that the ending is already printed and waiting. "So, if time doesn't really move," he said, "then what about death? Does it mean we're already dead somewhere too?" "Maybe," she replied, her gaze distant. "But maybe that means we're also forever alive somewhere else. Maybe death isn't the end. It's just another coordinate. This theory doesn't rob life of meaning, it transforms it. Loss becomes less of a vanishing and more of a veiling. The people we miss aren't gone. They're simply on another page, already written, forever there. Love isn't a fleeting warmth, it's an eternal ember, preserved in some quiet pocket of space-time. Still, it raises haunting questions. If the future is fixed, what happens to choice? Are we just actors in a story already told, or is our awareness itself the flame that lights each frame? Does knowing the map exist make the journey any less mysterious? She leaned closer. "Do you ever wonder," she said, "if memories are just us visiting the rooms we've already lived in?" He nodded. "And dreams. Maybe they're glimpses of rooms we haven't walked into yet." As this quiet contemplation folds into your breath, let yourself feel the stillness between moments, not empty, but full. A suspended hush where time doesn't slip away. It holds you, gently. And now, from this serene geometry of all that is, we descend into the spaces where time is not still, but worn, where it doesn't cradle, but consumes. Let us enter decay. Let us see what time costs. Temporal decay and information loss. A candle burns low in a quiet room. You're not watching the flame. You're watching the story, how it bends, flickers, then disappears. Not just heat, not just light, but something deeper. A moment unrepeatable. A history dissolving. Hey, did you ever think about where moments go when they vanish? The voice feels close, familiar. Like your grandma's laugh or the exact color of your childhood room. There's a pause, soft like breath before sleep. Yeah, the second voice replies. Sometimes I wonder if memory is just the ash left behind, still warm, but already gone. In physics, there's a law, the kind scientists trust like a compass. Information cannot be destroyed. Everything that happens, every flicker of light, every shiver of wind, leaves a trace. That's what we believe, until we stare into a black hole. In those places, those silent, invisible collapse points, the rules seem to vanish. Toss in a photograph, a poem, a promise whispered in a field, and nothing comes back. No data, no imprint, not even the echo of what used to be. To the laws of physics, that's a kind of betrayal. You might say, well, life erases things all the time. The look in someone's eyes before goodbye, the sound of footsteps you can no longer summon. But these losses feel personal, deeply unfair, not just forgotten, but undone. Time, we thought, was the keeper of change. But what if it's also the thief of form, not just the artist of transition, but the butcher of memory? Maybe erosion doesn't only wear away stone, it carves away knowing, layer by layer, until nothing remains but smooth, silent absence. One person stares at a broken plate and wonders who last touched it. Another only sees trash. This is where information loss becomes human, what we choose to preserve, and what we let the dark consume. Is your mind holding on to too much? Or too little? That photograph you forgot to take, that name you meant to write down. These are not failures. These are normal fractures in a glass we're all drinking from. Even black holes, it turns out, may leave behind shadows of what they swallow, patterns still debated, even in the dreams of physicists. But here's a softer truth. Memory may be flawed, but it fights. It resists. It builds shrines out of jokes, songs, gestures. It leaves clues in the way someone stirs tea, in the way you avoid a certain street because once it mattered too much. Time wants to erase, but memory rebels. And maybe that's enough. Not to win, but to be heard, like a paper boat floating upstream. Outside, someone says, "Hey, do you remember that night with the lanterns?" "Barely," comes the reply. "But sometimes I think I dreamed it. It still makes me smile, though." So perhaps we don't need perfect records. Perhaps feeling is the residue that survives after everything else burns away. And now, we breathe slowly through what remains. The ashes still warm, the story still real, if only in the echo of our attention. We rest here for just a moment longer, before stepping into dreams that might last longer than time itself. Time in dreams. Somewhere between the last breath of waking and the first plunge into sleep, the mind slips its tether to the clock. In that silent fall, reality softens, and time, so rigid and structured in daylight, becomes fluid. You might find yourself walking down a hallway that stretches forever, or talking to someone who passed away years ago. And yet, when you open your eyes, only a few minutes have passed. Or maybe an entire night's worth of memory was condensed into the blink of a dream. Did that whole story just happen in 5 minutes? I don't know. In there, it felt like a week, maybe more. There's something eerie and poetic about how time behaves in dreams. It doesn't tick. It sways, spins, rewinds. Scenes shift without warning, skipping causality like stones across a lake. You never ask why the laws of physics seem to crumble, because your dreaming mind accepts them as natural. But what does that say about how much control we actually have over time, or how little? Scientists suggest that during REM sleep, the brain unmoors itself from the usual constraints of chronology. Neural circuits fire in irregular patterns. Sensory information stops anchoring you to the present. There is no sunlight marking the hour, no phone vibrating with schedules. Inside the dream, time becomes sculpted by emotion and imagination. Joy lasts longer. Fear intensifies every moment. Boredom evaporates as the subconscious crafts stories not meant to be measured, but felt. Why did it feel so real? Maybe because it was real to who you were, for that version of you. There's an unsettling idea floating beneath this. If time in dreams is so convincingly elastic, if a moment can stretch and a lifetime collapse into a single flash, then how trustworthy is our waking sense of time? Could it be that time itself is nothing more than agreement? That what we call real time is just a dream we all happen to share? And what if our waking life is simply the most stable dream of all, governed not by logic, but by collective consistency? We mark our calendars, we wear watches, but in the grand theater of consciousness, maybe time is just the curtain, not the story. Do you think dreams mean something? Maybe they remind us that time doesn't belong to clocks. It belongs to us. As your thoughts soften and eyelids grow heavy, let this idea nest gently in your mind. Time, like a dream, does not need to obey. It only needs to be experienced. Some of the deepest truths emerge when the rules go quiet. And now, let sleep carry you deeper, as we ask what it means to exist inside the time of others. Borrowed time. There's a silence that settles over hospitals at 3 a.m. Not heavy, not fearful, just still, like the world itself is pausing to catch its breath. Somewhere down a long hallway, a heart monitor beeps softer than before. And in that pause, a nurse whispers, "He made it through the night." Just 6 words, but they hold a whole world. You've probably heard the phrase borrowed time, a quiet acknowledgement, a subtle awe, a recognition that someone, maybe even you, wasn't guaranteed to still be here, yet somehow is. Borrowed time isn't just a poetic turn of phrase, it's a paradox that curls itself around survival. When someone escapes death, we say they've borrowed time, but from whom? The future? The past? Or perhaps the life that could have been? One evening, 2 strangers stood under the same awning, watching a sudden summer rain blur the streetlights. "Nice timing," one said with a laugh. The other smiled. "Honestly, I wasn't supposed to be here at all. Flight was delayed. I guess I'm on borrowed time." That's the thing. It sneaks up on you. A detour, a diagnosis, a moment of almost, but not quite. And suddenly, life feels like something extended, not possessed. And if time is borrowed, what does that make us? Guests, stewards, or simply passers-by, entrusted for a while with a stretch of seconds that aren't truly ours? We often try to control time, schedule it, manage it, save it. But borrowed things can't be controlled. They can only be respected. Maybe that's the quiet truth hiding underneath the phrase, that our hours aren't earned, but entrusted, given with the softest kind of expectation. Use this well. I once heard someone say, "I wasn't ready to retire, but then my doctor called, and everything after that became sharper. Breakfast with his daughter, walking slower, holding longer. Because when time feels borrowed, it becomes sacred. Not more, just more present." There's something haunting about that idea. Not terrifying, just sobering. Because it shifts the question. It's not how much time do I have, but what am I doing with the time I've been given? A man walks into a secondhand bookstore and sees a battered clock on the shelf. He doesn't ask if it works. He just stares for a while and says, "Reminds me of my grandfather's." Then he buys it. No need for function, just the weight of memory. Sometimes, borrowed time isn't from the universe. It's from the people who came before us, from chances they didn't get, from wars they didn't survive, from dreams they handed down like folded letters tucked in coat pockets. Maybe what we call borrowed is just time passed forward, not as inheritance, but as hope. And maybe, just maybe, the debt we owe isn't to some cosmic banker ticking down a stopwatch. Maybe it's to the moments we dare to fill with meaning, to the small, sacred choices we make on an ordinary afternoon, to the people who say, "Stay just a bit longer," and to those who quietly do. Now let sleep take its turn. The hour is slow, but soft, and as you drift, we turn the page once more to explore the lives we live that are not entirely ours, shaped by generations, etched into memory, quietly unfolding on inherited time. Generational time echoes. Sometimes you feel something before it even makes sense. A quiet grief in your chest when you pass a place you've never been. A strange tension when someone raises their voice. Not because it's dangerous now, but because once, long ago, for someone whose blood runs in you, it was. That's the soft haunting of generational time echoes. The idea that time is not only what we live through, but what we carry. In a conversation between a father and daughter sitting on the porch under an evening sky, sharing tea in silence. "Dad, why do I panic every time someone leaves the room angry?" He thinks for a long time, then whispers, "My father was a soldier. He used to slam doors. My mother flinched for years. I guess I never forgot how that felt. That fear, though it never belonged to the daughter, lives inside her still. Not as memory, but as inheritance. This is epigenetics, the science that shows how the marks of trauma, stress, even starvation, can be imprinted onto genes and passed along like family heirlooms wrapped in silence. And beyond biology, culture passes down wounds like ghost stories, a look, a tone, a tradition that doesn't quite explain itself but demands obedience. These are time's fingerprints. So whose time are you living in? Are you dancing to music composed before you were born? Or silencing your voice because an ancestor was once punished for speaking too loud? You might be chasing a dream that belonged to a grandmother you never met. Or perhaps avoiding risk because someone 2 generations back lost everything trying. "I always feel like I'm not allowed to be too happy," one woman told her therapist. "Why?" She shrugged. "My mother buried a brother in war. My happiness feels unfair." Generational echoes aren't always pain. Sometimes they're profound strength. The courage of a refugee lives on in the resilience of their grandchild. The tenderness of a quiet grandfather shows up in how you comfort a crying friend. Wisdom moves like water, sometimes deep underground, sometimes flooding through. And so the question arises, if time is echoing through you, can you change the song? What if your healing is not just your own, but a message sent backward through time? A way of telling the ghosts, it's okay now. We're safe. You can rest. When you begin to confront inherited fear, when you name what was once unspeakable, you may find the timeline bending. The script loosens, your present expands, and in doing so, the future rewrites itself. You don't just live after trauma, you begin to live beyond it. Because maybe time isn't a line, maybe it's a web, and when you tug gently at one part, with love, with truth, you send quiet waves across generations, forward and back. So tonight, if you find yourself burdened by a sorrow you don't understand, sit with it kindly. Ask it, whose voice are you? And listen. Not every story is yours to carry forever. Some you are here to release. As the evening deepens, we drift now into a stranger paradox. Moments so fleeting they vanish the second we try to name them. But for now, hold this. Healing doesn't just change you. It echoes through time. The fleeting nature of the present. The moment you notice the present, it's already gone. Like catching sunlight in your hands, warm for a second, then nothing but a shadow on your palm. A neuroscientist once described the present not as a dot on a timeline, but as a shimmer. Something our brain stitches together from fragments. A sound here, a color there, delivered late, layered slightly out of order. We call it now, but it's already memory. Always leaning forward, always disappearing before we can kneel at its feet. Did I miss it? You didn't miss it, someone replies gently. You just blinked. And sometimes that blink is all it takes for a whole memory to vanish before it's born. We scroll, we sip, we step into a room and forget why. Not because we're careless, but because the present is slippery. It's never meant to be held, only witnessed. And even that is an act of trust. The more we try to grasp it, to pin it down like a butterfly beneath glass, the more we flatten its beauty. A melody becomes noise when we rewind it too often. A breath becomes mechanical when we analyze its rhythm. And yet, we try. Someone in a coffee shop says, "Let me just finish this email, then I'll be present." But the email leads to a notification, and the moment they promised gets exhaled into the past. We're taught to seize the moment. But what if the moment isn't something to seize? What if it's something to surrender to, like a tide we float on, not a wave we surf? A woman sits alone at dusk, waiting for someone who's late. The air cools. A dog barks in the distance. She taps her phone, checks the time. But then, she stops. Just for a second, she feels the light shift behind her eyes. And there it is, the present. Not loud, not grand, just quietly there, like a friend who doesn't need to speak to be understood. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she says to no one. And somehow, that's enough. There is no finish line to the present. It's not a place we arrive. It's a stream we're already standing in, whether or not we look down and notice our feet getting wet. To live fully doesn't mean freezing time. It means softening enough to let it pass through us without resistance. A barista slides a cup across the counter. "You look like someone who needed this right now," he says. She smiles. "More than I realized." And in that shared glance, nothing big happens, but nothing needs to. The present, in all its vanishing grace, did what it always does. It flickered, it moved, it offered itself. So maybe we don't need to chase the present. Maybe it's been chasing us all along. Let us breathe now and descend into a place where time exists, but motion is gone. The Stillness Paradox. In the hush of midnight, when even the wind seems to sleep, have you ever wondered, if nothing moved, would time itself pause too? This is the Stillness Paradox. We often think of time as a rhythm measured by change. The ticking of a clock, the swaying of trees, the wrinkling of skin. Movement is our anchor, our proof that time exists. But what happens when movement ceases? A room sealed from the world. No sound enters, no breeze stirs. A candle is frozen mid-flicker. Even the dust dares not fall. In that chamber of perfect stillness, would you still feel time pass? Or would the silence lull you into the illusion that time had quietly slipped out the door? "I feel like time stops when I meditate," one voice says, "like I'm just being. No before, no after." Another responds, "Yeah, But the clock still ticks, doesn't it? Maybe time never stops. It's just that we stop measuring it. There's a quiet poetry in that thought. Perhaps time doesn't need movement. Perhaps it pulses beneath stillness, like a hidden river under frozen earth. We can't see it, but it moves just the same, slow, deliberate, eternal. Or maybe stillness is a kind of escape. In deep states of peace, when we lose all sense of urgency, of memory, even of self, there's no need for time, no expectation, no next, just now, held like a breath that never exhales. In a world obsessed with doing, stillness becomes rebellion. And in that rebellion, we meet a strange kind of timelessness, not because time has ended, but because our minds have unhooked from its machinery. No plans to chase, no past to regret, no future to fear, just presence. I think that's why people go into nature. The first voice says again, softer this time, not just to escape noise, but to find that stillness, that feeling where nothing needs to happen. And in that stillness, the second voice adds, you feel more alive, like you're touching something older than time. It's in those moments, quiet walks through snow, lying still in the dark, watching the world without wanting to change it, when we glimpse time from the outside. And what we find isn't a ticking clock. It's something quieter, something sacred. Maybe stillness doesn't erase time. Maybe it reveals it, not as a series of moving parts, but as a gentle hum in the background of being, a frequency that's always there, whether or not we notice it. So as we drift from this paradox into the next, carry this silence with you. Let it settle in your chest like warm fog. Because sometimes the most profound truths don't shout. They sit still, waiting for us to slow down enough to hear them. And now, from that stillness, we begin to sense a strange harmony, where time doesn't vanish, but synchronizes, not between clocks, but between hearts, thoughts, and distant minds. Let's step into that mystery together. Collective time. Some moments don't belong to you alone. They belong to us, even if no one speaks. A hush settles in a candlelit room. 100 people close their eyes, and somehow, without signal or command, they breathe in and out together. Not because they planned it, but because something inside them synchronized, like strings vibrating on the same invisible note. Do you feel that? Someone might whisper, and the other just nods. Not a thing to explain, just a time to live in. We're told time is personal, that your minutes are yours, your days stitched into your skin. But what if that's only part of the story? What if time doesn't just tick? It resonates. Think about it. When thousands raise their voices at a concert, do they feel the hour? Or do they dissolve into the pulse of something larger, where the seconds melt into the sound? A mother once told her child, "When we laugh together, it's like the clock forgets us." She didn't mean they stopped aging, only that they entered a shared current, a stretch of time that felt smoother, warmer, like water flowing without force. At weddings, funerals, gatherings where candles flicker and songs are sung low, time doesn't pass. It deepens. The silence has layers. The moments breathe with a rhythm that isn't counted, but known. You don't need to look at your watch to know when dinner has gone cold. You feel it in the room, in the way conversations stall, and the clinking of cutlery falls into a softer beat. This is collective time, a clock made of glances, of gestures, of shared stillness. Even in mundane places, like a subway train filled with strangers, there are seconds when the noise quiets, and a kind of invisible thread seems to connect every heartbeat. Maybe someone shifts their bag, Another clears their throat. A moment passes, but it's not your moment alone. It belongs to everyone breathing beside you. Why do I always feel calmer when you're around? One person might ask another. Maybe, the reply comes slow and gentle. We're just good at keeping time together. And in that sentence, something lands. Not in the ears, but in the chest. Because perhaps time isn't just something you own. Maybe it's something you enter. A field, a frequency, a shared rhythm that forms when souls align, however briefly. When you sit in prayer beside a stranger. When your heartbeat matches the lull of your dog sleeping by your side. When laughter in the room swells and fades at just the right moment without cue or command. Is that just coincidence? Or is it something older, deeper, woven into the fabric of what it means to be human? A whisper lingers from a street corner memory. Two people walking in step, no need to talk, just the sound of shared footsteps in the dusk. I didn't want to be alone tonight, one says. You're not, the other answers. We're in this hour together. So maybe the truest kind of presence isn't found in solitude after all. Maybe it emerges in resonance, in the way our time tunes itself to the people we move beside. And now, as your breath softens and your thoughts slow, you're already entering a softer rhythm, one shared by others listening with closed eyes, stretched out in the quiet, their minds gently letting go. Because in this moment, you're not alone either. Let yourself drift now, from the rhythm of many into the stillness of those who never measure time at all. The time-free mind. Somewhere between silence and selfhood, the mind begins to drift, not forward, not backward, just away, as if the hands of the clock let go and time itself exhaled. In this quiet space, where awareness stretches like moonlight on still water, we stumble into something strange and sacred, the time-free mind. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't need ceremony. Sometimes it's just a moment during deep meditation when you no longer know what minute it is or whether you've been sitting for 5 seconds or 50 years. Sometimes it happens in the shimmer of a fever dream or under the kaleidoscopic swirl of a psychedelic state where your memories tangle with your heartbeat and everything unfolds all at once. No story, no schedule, just existence. Hey, she whispered. Have you ever felt like time stopped, not because the world paused, but because your mind did? He nodded slowly, eyes distant. Yeah, in the forest last fall. I watched a leaf fall and suddenly there was no past, no future, just the leaf, just me. And in that simple exchange, we see it. The truth that time may not always be a line. Maybe it's a rhythm we've trained ourselves to follow, like tapping fingers on a desk or blinking between thoughts. But when the rhythm fades, what's left might not be chaos. It might be freedom. Neurologists have studied these experiences. They call it temporal disintegration, a loss of the usual mental ordering of events. But for monks, mystics, and many of us who've paused long enough to listen inwardly, it feels less like disintegration and more like expansion. Without time's scaffolding, the mind floats. And strangely, in that weightlessness, we feel more grounded, as if being isn't something that happens, it simply is. If we can reach a space where the before and after melt away, what does that say about time itself? Maybe it's not the architecture of reality, but more like wallpaper, a familiar pattern we've grown used to seeing. And if we peel it back, what we find isn't emptiness, it's presence. A presence so full, it doesn't need to move to be alive. So, do you think time is real? She asked, brushing dust off an old photo. He held the picture between his fingers, pausing. I think it's useful, but not necessary. That's the paradox. Time feels like gravity for the mind. It keeps our days upright, our thoughts arranged in tidy rows. But every so often, through prayer, meditation, or even a sudden laugh that turns the moment timeless, we get a glimpse of what lies underneath. And it's not disorder, it's clarity. You don't need a mountain retreat or sacred incense to get there. Sometimes it happens when you lose yourself in a song, or when a child's laughter echoes louder than the ticking of a clock. In those rare, raw spaces where we stop counting, we start being. As the mind softens, we prepare to ask a deeper question, one that unsettles even the most careful philosopher, yet whispers gently to every dreamer. What if time doesn't always tell the truth? What if it lies? Let's walk forward, or maybe inward, and see what truths time has been hiding behind its perfect tick. False time and simulation. It begins with a flicker. The world outside your window hums along, clocks ticking, calendars flipping, seasons shifting like scenery in a well-rehearsed play. And yet, there's a whisper beneath it all, soft and unsettling. What if this rhythm is not organic, but rendered? Not flowing, but loaded. A man once stood on a subway platform watching the lights flicker above his head. Feels like we're in some glitchy game, he muttered to the stranger beside him. The woman smiled, her phone frozen mid-scroll. Maybe we are, she replied, eyes still locked on the frozen screen. And maybe Monday never really ended. It just got looped. In the simulation hypothesis, time isn't the river we've always imagined. It's a track on a playlist, played back when needed. The seconds you feel slipping past may not be moving at all. They might be coordinates in a file. Each morning, a carefully arranged timestamp. Each memory, a fabricated breadcrumb to guide you back to a past that never occurred. But if that's true, who are we really? Are we explorers, or just reflections inside a codebase too deep to touch? Sometimes when you're waiting for your tea to steep and the kettle hasn't even started, there's this eerie feeling, like time is pausing just for you. No birds chirp. The hallway light hums, but does not flicker. You reach for your phone, but it hasn't updated. 5 seconds ago looks the same as now. Maybe that's the curtain slipping. If our timeline is rendered moment to moment, not continuous but loaded in chunks, then what we call history could be a saved file. You think you've lived through decades, but how can you be sure? What if your earliest memory was the first frame of your existence, booted up like the opening scene of a game? Two friends sit in a car at night. One stares up at the stars. Do you ever feel like none of this is actually moving? Like we're paused, but still talking? The other shrugs. Maybe that's the trick. They give you motion sickness so you think you're traveling. The idea is unsettling, yes, but also oddly freeing. If time is code, then awareness is the only thing unrendered. The observer, not the observed. Maybe that's where reality hides, not in hours or minutes, but in the depth of noticing. Your breath, the slight pressure of the pillow under your neck, the warmth behind your closed eyelids. It's not that the world isn't real. It's just that realness might be something else, not a measure of time, but of presence. You feel a moment, not because it happens, but because you're there to catch it. Just like dreams, just like déjà vu. When you wake up unsure what day it is, when you reach for a memory and it feels too smooth, too rehearsed, ask yourself, is time telling the truth or just telling a story? And even if it is a simulation, does it matter? After all, the rain still taps your window like it loves you. and your heart still keeps a rhythm no machine could fake. Now, close your eyes. Let the timeline render itself without your effort. In the silence between seconds, we step next into a very different kind of time. Not one that can be programmed or faked, but one that feels sacred. Sacred time. Some moments don't just pass, they arrive. You don't check your watch when you're falling in love, or witnessing the birth of your child, or standing alone beneath a cathedral of stars. These are not just when something happens, but where something sacred unfolds. In these moments, time no longer feels like a line you're moving along. It feels like a doorway. And on the other side, something eternal waits, not with a calendar in hand, but with open arms. "Do you remember that night?" she asked, her voice soft in the dim kitchen light. "When we sat under the old fig tree and didn't speak for hours?" "Yeah," he replied. It felt like one long breath, like time didn't move forward, but deeper. He didn't need to explain. She knew what he meant. They had been somewhere that clocks couldn't follow. In many spiritual traditions, time is not just measured by seconds and seasons, but by presence. Think of the Sabbath. It's not merely a day of rest, it's a consecrated space in time, a retreat from the ordinary. Or rites of passage, marriages, funerals, naming ceremonies. They don't just mark time, they transform it. These events are infused with something weightier, something that bends time into meaning. In these moments, we are no longer just living, we are being held. There's a kind of hush that falls over sacred time. It's not the silence of absence, but of fullness, like a deep inhale held in reverence. In those rare seconds, the universe feels suspended, as if everything is pausing, not because it must, but because it wants to watch. You are not racing forward. You are arriving. "I think I've only ever felt truly alive a few times," he said, eyes fixed on nothing. "And they were always the moments I couldn't describe afterward. Because words belong to the world of clocks," she answered. "But the sacred, that's another language." And maybe that's the paradox. The more profound the moment, the harder it is to place on a timeline. You don't remember what time your child was born. You remember the feeling. You don't recall the exact hour your loved one said goodbye. You remember how the air felt heavier, how even the birds seemed to sing slower. This is sacred time. It doesn't tick. It touches. It is not counted, but encountered. If that's true, then maybe the deepest measure of time isn't duration, but meaning. 100 aimless hours may pass like mist, while one sacred second can stretch into eternity. That one moment, fully lived, becomes bigger than time itself. It becomes memory, emotion, truth. It becomes home. And so we begin to wonder, if meaning makes a moment sacred, then perhaps sacredness is not rare, only rarely noticed. Maybe eternity hides in plain sight, tucked between a glance and a heartbeat, waiting for you to pause long enough to feel it. Let's rest here, in that breath between thoughts. Let the clocks fade. Let the rhythm of presence guide you, not to where you were or where you're going, but to where you are. And now, let us follow the sacred into the impossible, when time meets itself at a crossroads. Temporal Intersection. Somewhere between sleep and waking, there's a strange sensation, like a familiar voice brushing past your shoulder, though no one is there. Not a ghost exactly. More like time itself, folding slightly inward, just enough to whisper. Physics once insisted that time ticks forward like a disciplined soldier, never veering off course. But in deeper theories, where gravity distorts and speed reshapes the fabric of space, time begins to ripple, even tangle. Two events separated by decades might, under certain cosmic pressures, lean toward each other, like strangers in a narrow hallway who suddenly feel the urge to nod hello. In dreams, this happens all the time. You find yourself speaking with someone long gone, yet the conversation feels present, real, undeniable, not a memory, not fiction, just now. "Hey," a man says softly as he lifts his bag from the train seat beside you. "This is where I get off. But thanks for the story. I think I needed that today." You blink. You didn't say anything, did you? And yet, in that moment, it felt like something passed between you, a knowing, a shared ripple in time, as though your thoughts brushed the edges of a memory that wasn't yours to begin with. What if, instead of a line, time is more like a woven field, stretchable, interlaced? What if a goodbye from childhood still echoes softly in some distant corridor, and a hello you haven't yet spoken already trembles on the lips of someone waiting? We often say, timing is everything, but maybe what we mean is, timing is the intersection of everything. A job offer that arrives minutes after you've given up. A friend who calls right before you unravel. A piece of music on the radio that finishes the sentence your heart didn't know how to begin. "What are the odds?" someone says, as you both reach for the last umbrella in the stand. But maybe it isn't odds at all. Maybe it's a pattern, a pulse. A quiet law we haven't named yet, where emotion tugs on the threads of time and pulls moments closer, like lovers reunited across the folds of a crowded map. Think about it. If gravity can bend light, why not memory? If speed can stretch time, why not love? In myths, our ancestors arrive just when we need them, not with fanfare, but in small ways. The recipe you suddenly remember. The advice that enters your thoughts mid-crisis. A scent that stops you in your tracks, reminding you of someone who once held your hand without needing words. These aren't just coincidences. They might be collisions, points where the past and future don't obey the sequence we expect. Points where life reminds us that endings and beginnings are only shadows cast by something deeper, presence. So if time intersects, then maybe nothing is truly over. Maybe the goodbyes we couldn't bear are still unfolding, gently, softly, elsewhere. And the hellos we dream of are not lost. They're just taking the long way around. And if that's true, then right now, in some hidden fold of the universe, you are being seen, heard, remembered. And perhaps this is the moment when everything intersects. Even if you fall asleep now, that thought will wait for you. And now, one final paradox. The thought that lets go. The thought that lets go. There's a certain kind of thought that doesn't demand to be solved. It lingers, not like a riddle awaiting its solution, but like the scent of rain on warm pavement. Familiar, present, and quietly, beautifully unsolved. "Do you think we always need closure?" she asks, gazing out the train window, watching the trees blur into soft streaks of green. He shakes his head gently, his voice a whisper in the hum of the carriage. Maybe not. Maybe the comfort isn't in knowing, but in learning how to carry the not knowing. This is the paradox of the thought that lets go. A paradox that doesn't spiral in confusion, but one that hums in harmony with silence. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. A question you no longer press for answers, but hold in your pocket like a stone you picked up on a walk years ago. You don't remember the exact moment you found it, but its shape still fits your palm. You don't need to know why. Sometimes we chase thoughts like they're prey. We want to wrestle clarity from them, to tame the mystery into understanding. But not all knots want to be untangled. Some are meant to rest in their pattern, intricate and eternal. They are the mazes without exit signs, places not built to be escaped, but felt. He turns to her again. What if peace isn't the end of questions, but the acceptance of them? She smiles, not because she knows, but because she understands. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean the thought disappears or becomes irrelevant. It simply means stepping aside, letting it breathe without forcing it to change shape. There's grace in the pause, reverence in the silence, a quiet bow to the limits of understanding. And isn't that the final turn in the maze? The moment when we stop moving, not because we are lost, but because we are finally still. The walls of the labyrinth stretch on, yes, but tonight, they don't need to be solved. They cradle you. Close your eyes. Let the thought that once chased you become the lullaby that carries you. The journey doesn't end here, but your need to navigate it can rest now. Good night, traveler. The maze remains, but for now, so do you. And that is enough. And so, traveler, you've wandered through 100 doors that led nowhere and everywhere at once. Time bent for you, reversed for you, paused for you, and yet here you are, still here. Maybe that's the final paradox. Time didn't move. You did. Like waves that carry a leaf yet leave the ocean unchanged, these riddles weren't meant to be solved. They were meant to hold you, gently, like the hush before sleep. Tonight, let your mind soften its grip. Let the maze remain unsolved, not because you failed to find the answer, but because some answers arrive only in dreams. Rest now. The clock is still ticking, but not for you.